Story 1. I paid for my sister's wedding venue as a gift. Now, my other entitled sister is demanding I do the same for her, and our parents are calling me selfish for refusing. I, 32, female, have two younger sisters. Let's call them Michelle and Denise. Michelle is 30, and Denise is 27. Denise and I don't really have a good relationship, and we hadn't been on speaking terms for the past couple of years after an incident at a Christmas party that I had hosted 3 years ago. My mother wasn't feeling well, so she had asked me to host the family for Christmas. Since it was my first time, I was trying hard to make everything perfect. My husband and I worked really hard on the arrangements, and everyone actually seemed impressed with it. But for some reason, Denise made it a point to make fun of everything that we had done for the party. She kept making insulting jokes. I've forgotten what exactly she said, but she was really getting on my nerves that day, and so after a while, I decided that I had had enough and told her to shut up or just leave if she didn't like what I had arranged. We got into a bit of a fight, and she ended up leaving, and we didn't speak to each other after that. Even when we would meet at parties or other family events, she would give me the cold shoulder, and I would ignore her as well. Our parents tried to fix things between us several times over the years, but instead of telling her to apologize to me for her behavior that day, they insisted that I reach out to her. Apparently, I was older and I should be more mature about these things and not let petty fights get in the way of our relationship. Michelle was on my side and told me that I had no reason to apologize to her because her behavior at the party had been pathetic, and anybody in my place would have reacted the same way. The truth was that Michelle and I were both well aware of how spoiled Denise was and how our parents enabled her bad behavior, and this wasn't even something new. This is how things have been ever since we were kids, which is probably what led to Denise becoming such a brat. My parents always favored her because she was the youngest and spoiled her rotten. Even when she would behave badly or act out in public, they would just laugh it off but never reprimanded her. Michelle and I had been raised really differently and were a lot more well-behaved than she was. So we never behaved the way that she did because as kids, we didn't get away with any of that like she did. It was like she had been raised by different people altogether, and that's how she had turned out to be such a menace. Michelle and I tried our best to be friends with her and make her a decent person, but it never worked because she was just too stubborn and ill-mannered. Unfortunately, the world didn't care about Denise the way that our parents did. She had been fired from a bunch of jobs for being rude to colleagues, and occasionally even clients throughout her adult life. Everyone had termed her difficult to work with, and that had earned her a pretty bad reputation. She barely had any friends because of her nasty attitude, and after our fight, even Michelle and I stopped speaking to her because we could tell that she was just never going to change. She thought the world of herself but nothing of anyone else, and we were not ready to put up with that kind of behavior anymore. We were all just too old to tolerate it. So no matter what our parents thought, we were not going to force ourselves to be on good terms with her just for their sake. But then, last year, Michelle got married to her boyfriend of 7 years, Andy. Michelle and Andy had been together for a long time, and I knew the guy really well since he and I had gotten quite close while they were dating. He and I had really similar personalities and a lot of common interests, and Michelle and my husband often joked that we were more like siblings than Michelle and I. So, it's needless to say that we knew each other quite well and got along. So, when Andy proposed, I decided that I was going to pay for their venue, and that was going to be my wedding gift to them. This was supposed to be private information, but my mother had found out about it while they had been planning and Michelle had been discussing the wedding expenses. We didn't think that it was going to be a big deal, but now it's come back to bite me. My parents said nothing about me paying for the wedding venue for Michelle's wedding at the time, but now that Denise is getting married as well, she wants me to pay for her wedding venue as well, and my parents think that I should do it because otherwise, it would just be unfair. Denise had reached out to me a couple of months ago when she first got engaged and said that she wanted to apologize to me for the way that she had behaved with me. Not just on the day of the Christmas party but all through our lives, and she wanted to make a fresh start now that she was getting married. I had forgiven her, not thinking much of it because we had to see each other at events anyway, and I wanted to avoid the unnecessary awkwardness around her. It also seemed to be a genuine apology at the time, and she was my sister, so I wanted to give her a chance and try to make things right with her. But I had absolutely not expected things to turn ugly so soon after our reconciliation. Denise and Michelle had already made up last year around the time of her wedding, but that was because our parents had emotionally manipulated Michelle to invite her to her wedding. Michelle was a lot softer than me, so she invited Denise to the wedding, but she had discussed it with me first. I told her to go ahead and invite Denise because they didn't have any issues, and Michelle had only stopped speaking to her because of me. I didn't want that to become a bone of contention because that would just make me feel like the two of us were ganging up against her, and it wouldn't be fair. So I reassured Michelle that I wouldn't mind if she invited our youngest sister to her wedding and even encouraged her to do it as a sign of goodwill to keep the peace of the family. So Denise had attended Michelle's wedding and had actually been quite gracious about it. It had been kind of awkward, but she didn't do anything attention-seeking or mean at the wedding and just sat through everything quietly. She didn't speak much and left quite early, but at least she had attended, and she had been willing to put everything behind her. So that made me feel like she had grown up in the couple of years that we hadn't been speaking to her, which is why I decided to forgive her at the beginning of this year when she contacted me to make amends with me. We had been in touch on and off for the last couple of months, and it had been nice reconnecting with her and getting to know her as a new person. She had really convinced me that she had turned over a new leaf and was no longer the spoiled, entitled, and bratty girl that we used to know. She also told me a lot about her fiancé, Hank. Apparently, they had met through a dating app last year, but she had been so in love with him that they moved in together within a month and were so sure of each other that they had decided to get married after just a year of living together. I personally thought that they were rushing into it, but it was not my place to say anything because they really seemed to be in love, so I kept my opinions to myself. But then, Denise asked me a couple of weeks ago if I could pay for her wedding venue, just like I had done for Michelle. No prizes for guessing what I told her when she asked me that. I had obviously declined because the circumstances of Michelle's wedding were really different from hers, and I didn't think I was willing to spend the kind of money on Denise's wedding. When I declined, she didn't argue with me and just disconnected the call without saying goodbye, so I had no idea about what was coming. Within an hour of that phone call, I received another phone call from my parents, and to say that they were furious would be an understatement. They were freaking out at me for saying no to Denise because apparently, right after that phone call, she had called our parents up crying because now she had to change her budget for the wedding. She had just assumed that I would be paying for the venue since I had done that for Michelle, and now she was accusing me of being snarky to her on purpose just because I had a favorite among my sisters. I did have a favorite, and it was Michelle because she was the only one who had bothered to be nice to me all throughout, unlike Denise, who had been horrible to both of us and had always tried her best to put us down. Even on the day of the Christmas party, she had been trying to put me down, and it wasn't even the first time that she was doing something like that. All the other times we would just ignore it because we didn't want to indulge her and create drama because that would be playing into her hands and giving her just the kind of attention that she wanted. But the one time that I stood up for myself, we ended up not even speaking to each other for the next couple of years. So, of course, I had a favorite, and it wasn't Denise because she was the one who brought this on to herself. I didn't see any reason for me to feel bad about it, and I told my parents that they couldn't guilt-trip me into paying for the wedding venue. Denise and I had just started reconciling, but we still had a long way to go before our relationship was actually fixed, and I was not paying for her wedding for no reason. I also explained to them that I had known Andy for a much longer time than Hank, whom I had met only twice at lunch with Denise, and both times we had barely even said anything to each other. But with Michelle and Andy, it was really different because he was also a good friend of mine, not just my sister's partner. So I treated that as a wedding gift for them, and they didn't even have to ask for it because I wanted to do that for them. But with Denise and Hank, I don't think I owed it to them to pay for the wedding venue or even contribute to their wedding in any way, shape, or form. I could buy them any gift that they wanted from the registry like the other guests, but I wasn't going to shell out more money to pay for her venue. It sounded mean, but to be perfectly honest, she and I were just not as close as Michelle and I are. And I don't even know her fiancé, unlike Andy. But my parents were not happy with that explanation and decided they were going to fight with me until I agreed to cover for Denise. They started arguing with me and said that I couldn't pick favorites because it was problematic and they didn't want me to hurt Denise just a few months before her wedding because that would mean the family falling apart once again. And they didn't want that. They told me that they had very narrowly avoided having problems during Michelle's wedding and had made her invite Denise so nobody would ask questions. So we could at least all put up a united front. And they were not going to let me ruin that this time. So it became very clear to me that it was more important for them to keep up the appearance of us being a normal and happy family. And that was even more ridiculous to me. So I doubled down on my decision, and I told them that I didn't care what other people said. Our relatives and others could gossip about us if they wanted to, but the fear of that wasn't going to make me pay for the venue. My mother almost started crying after arguing in circles with me for a while, and my dad told me that I was being incredibly selfish and entitled. I almost started laughing when he said that because it was obviously Denise who was being entitled here. When I told him to elaborate, he said that it was of me to expect the family to still keep in touch with me if I wasn't even prepared to act like it, and step up and be there for my little sister. I had to try really hard to take them seriously at that point since it was really obvious to me that they were grasping at straws to get me to agree. So I told my parents that they were free to cut me off because there was no way that I would be contributing to Denise's wedding. And if that means sacrificing my relationship with them, so I'm willing to do it. I was honestly just getting sick of them constantly trying to manipulate us into going easy on Denise. This time, they were asking for way too much, and I was putting my foot down. So if that made them mad, then they just have to deal with it or cut me off like they had said they would. I wasn't going to fight it anymore because that would just lead to more arguments. And I didn't want that because I was just sick of fighting with either them or Denise. And even if we didn't fight and decided to make up, that would lead to more manipulation in the future, which is also not something I wanted. So they could either have a relationship with me on my terms now or just leave. I had given them a very pretty clear choice, and now it was up to them if they wanted to still keep fighting with me for Denise or they could just let it go and not jeopardize their relationship with me. So they obviously chose the former because to them it was more important to spoil her than to be actually good parents to all of their kids. They cursed at me on the call that day and said that they never wanted to speak to me again. I only wish that they really hadn't spoken to me after that. After they hung up that day, I didn't think they would call me back anytime soon because the fight had been a bad one. But they called me the very next day to tell me that they had made up their mind about what they wanted to do and said that they were going to cut me off since I wasn't acting in the best interests of my family. That was just a fancy way for them to say that they thought I was being selfish. I believe that they had thought that the threat of them cutting me off would scare me into contributing to Denise's wedding. But like I said, I didn't care anymore. So I told them to go right ahead and even offered to block them myself so they wouldn't have to put in any extra effort in order to cut me off. They were really mad at me and told me that I was a really selfish brat and I was going to regret this in the future when I didn't have any family to think about me. I didn't pay much mind to them because honestly, the drama was getting under my skin and I hadn't signed up for any of this. So I told them to stop bothering me because no threats were going to make me contribute to the wedding, and they might as well give up trying since at this point, they were only just making huge fools out of themselves. My parents stopped calling after that, but there was always Denise to replace them, and she started calling me to tell me that the way I was treating her was really mean-spirited. She even tried to play the victim and said that the reason she had always been mean to me and Michelle while we were growing up was because we would treat her like an outsider in our own private little club, and that made her feel alienated. Honestly, that was just a bunch of baloney because we always wanted to include her in things, but she was the one who would turn up her nose at us, and that's how we started treating her like an outsider because she would act like one. So I was not buying the whole victim thing, and I reminded her that she couldn't just gaslight me into believing her BS. I blocked her personal number, but she just found other ways to contact me like from her fiancé's phone or from her friends' phone numbers, and I didn't even have those saved, so I couldn't even ignore all of it. I was getting impatient because I just couldn't tolerate this level of annoyance, and so the last time that we spoke a couple of days ago, I said something and that really hurt her. Yet again, she was harping on about how I was hurting her feelings and that I owed her this because I had contributed to Michelle's wedding. So I snapped on the phone and told her that I owed her nothing because she wasn't as close to me as Michelle was since she had never treated me with respect or love. And she always took us all for granted because that's how she was raised. I told her that had she ever bothered to put in the time and effort to be nice to us, then I would have gladly contributed to her wedding, and she wouldn't even have had to ask. I would have just done it. But it's really tacky the way that she has been behaving for the past couple of days and acting as if I owe it to her to pay for the venue. I told her that her behavior has been nothing short of ridiculous and entitled, and it's getting on my nerves. Now, she still had a chance to back down and let this go. But instead, she decided that she was going to argue with me and make things worse. She told me that the only reason she expected me to cover for the venue was because I had done it for Michelle, but she should have known that I was too insecure and jealous of her to let her have a beautiful wedding, because that would mean that all our relatives would only be talking about her wedding and she would win again. And of course we couldn't stand that, which is why we were not okay with her getting married the way that she wanted to. It was straight up just absurd, because nobody thinks like that. We're all adults here except for her, I guess. So to retaliate, I told her that maybe the reason I didn't want to contribute to her wedding was just because I didn't like her, and also because I didn't want to throw away my money on a marriage that wouldn't even last long, given how she is completely crazy and can manage to drive anyone away. So it doesn't make sense for me to waste money on a short-lived marriage. She lost her mind after that and started screaming at me, but I didn't wait around to hear what she was saying and hung up. But things have become kind of chaotic after that, because my parents and a couple of my other relatives have contacted me to tell me what I said was out of line, because now she's really miserable and believes that saying her fiancé would leave her was a low blow. So am I the a-hole for telling my sister that her fiancé would leave her because of her crazy behavior? Update 1. Hi. So I went through the comments here, and most of the people here agreed that I didn't say anything that was out of line, and if she didn't want me to lash out at her, then she probably shouldn't have been trying to insult me even as she was trying to ask for help. And I guess it's true. I have no reason to feel bad just because my parents and a couple of other relatives are supporting her. Michelle and Andy don't think I said anything wrong, and neither does my husband, and nor do most of you guys here. So I don't think I need to apologize to her for anything. I honestly just wish that they would understand this, because things have gotten really out of hand. My parents have been constantly trying to get to me so I can apologize to Denise and take back what I said, because apparently she is hurt by that. I don't even understand why that's hurting her so much. If she has any faith in her relationship, then she won't let my words bother her. I don't even know them that well, so my comment should be pretty much irrelevant to her. The only reason that I can think of is that she isn't really confident about her relationship. And that's why she is letting my words get to her, because I guess I hit a nerve with what I said. It's just a guess, but it might be true given how she has reacted to it. I can't think of a single other reason why someone would take this so hard. It might be for attention, but I think she receives enough of that from our parents already, and she hasn't gone public with this yet, so it seems unlikely. Either way, I'm definitely not going to apologize to her, because she doesn't deserve it. So she can continue to cry about this. It's not like she is going to cancel her wedding just because I'm not paying for the venue. That's still going to happen. So I really just don't understand what the fuss is all about. I had been feeling really bad about the way that my family was treating me just because I refused to go along with what Denise was telling me. But now it's clearer to me than ever that my parents don't care about anybody apart from her. She is always going to be their first priority, no matter how old she gets. They will continue to enable her until the very end, so it doesn't matter what I say. She is just going to remain the same person, incapable of change. Update 2. Okay, so the invitations to Denise's wedding were recently just sent out, and guess what? I didn't receive one, and neither did Michelle. Now, I can understand why she wouldn't want to invite me, but the fact that she didn't even invite Michelle, even though she had attended her wedding, is just ridiculous. When it was Michelle who didn't want to invite Denise to her wedding, our parents made sure that they talked her into it and made them reconcile. But all of a sudden, they don't care about appearances, because clearly what Denise wants is far more important than what Michelle wants at her wedding. The double standards are honestly just sickening, and it makes me so mad. Michelle and I met for lunch the other day, and she told me that our parents had even texted her to let her know that she could still get an invite as long as she promised to cut me off and never speak to me again until I apologized. She told them to leave her alone and said that they were the worst parents on the planet. So they started arguing with her and accused her of being my minion. They were really vicious and said that at this point, they only had one daughter, and that was Denise. Apparently, Michelle and I are really selfish and don't deserve to be related to them, because we are clearly never going to make any sacrifices for our family. It's ridiculous how entitled they sound, And they don't even realize it because they think letting them walk all over us is the only way that we can prove that we are indeed loyal to our family. It's crazy how their minds work and the mental gymnastics required to make us the bad guys for simply not wanting to waste our time, money, and efforts on someone who will never appreciate them. We have given Denise several chances to improve her behavior and act like a normal person around us, but she just refuses to grow up and be a decent person. So I don't understand why we are expected to put up with it constantly and pretend that she is a nice human being when she obviously isn't. It's not our fault that she never learned how to be kind to other people and not treat them like utter garbage. And the credit for all of that goes to our parents because they made sure that they raised their youngest daughter to be the most insufferable and annoying person on the planet at any given moment. They were the ones who spoiled her, and I would honestly say that they ruined her life by making her so entitled because now nobody likes her, and she can barely even hold down a job thanks to her horrible attitude. They certainly didn't do her any favors and are still continuing to enable this behavior. It's just sad and pathetic at this point. Update 3. So they're married now. Denise and Hank got married a few days ago, and obviously, I was not invited. But I did see a lot of photos because it was all over my social media, and I realized that they got married in my parents' backyard, probably because I didn't pay for the venue. But they seem to have had fun, so I don't even know what they were all so mad about earlier. They could have just adjusted their plans accordingly instead of throwing a tantrum and making a big deal out of nothing. But well, what's done is done now. I'm just happy that they're married and I, unlike them, don't want to waste any more of my time talking about them to other people, which they did at their wedding. A lot of relatives reached out to me afterward to ask if it was true that I had promised Denise that I would contribute to her wedding by covering the expenses for the venue, but I backed out at the very last moment, which is why they had to disinvite me and also change the plans to get married in my parents' backyard for free. So that's the version that they're going with, but it was pointless because I obviously told my relatives the truth, and they believed me because everyone knows about the reputation that Denise and my parents have, so they were not going to buy that version anyway. Their attempt to save face was pretty useless if you ask me. I haven't spoken to any of them ever since the last fight that we had, and I don't really think that we can ever get back on good terms again after this. Way too much time has passed, and honestly, unless they can really prove to us that they have changed, I don't see myself having a relationship with any of them in the future. Michelle and I have tolerated a lot of disrespect over the years, but that has finally come to an end now. Earlier, my parents could just manipulate us and guilt-trip us into forgiving her. But now that we are not on speaking terms with them either, I can't do that to us. And I for one am glad about it because sometimes things just become too much to handle. And that's exactly what happened with my family. Sure, it's not like I don't miss speaking to my parents because we did have a lot of good times. And they were nice to us sometimes as well. But in comparison to what happened recently, I feel like cutting them out of my life was the best decision that I could have made. I had been a little down in the dumps the day the photos of the wedding were posted, but I soon realized that I wasn't wanted among those people anyway, so it was best for me to just stay away, and so that's what I'm going to do now. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Parents promised to pay for my college but refused when my golden child brother didn't get accepted to his dream college, while I did. So I told everyone about what happened. For context, I, 20M, have a younger brother, Jared. He has always been treated better by my parents. He's just 10 months younger than me, but my parents decided to get us enrolled in school at the same time. We have always competed against each other since we've always been in the same grade, and the clear winner in every competition has been me because I've always been better than him in every single thing, academically or even otherwise. I've had better grades since the beginning and had always wanted to go to Caltech to study data science, while my brother had always been more interested in biology and would always brag about how he would grow up and become one of the pioneers of microbiology and do something really big. But he was mostly just all bark and no bite. In spite of being the more academically inclined brother, my parents refused to pay for me to go to college after 4 years of giving me hope. Around my junior year of high school, I was doing really well and had a feeling that I might get accepted into Caltech when the time came around. So I sat my parents down and had a proper discussion with them about this, and they promised me that they would definitely cover the expenses for me. It would not even be hard for them because my dad had been running the business that he had inherited from his father ever since he was young, and they had been blessed with wealth right from the beginning. So it was not a big deal for them, but I had just been worried about it because both my parents had to make their own way through college. Even my dad, in spite of being rich, because my grandfather wanted him to work and pay his dues before he inherited the business. I was just worried that he might try to do something similar with me. However, my parents always reassured me that they had this, and when the time came, they would make sure that I would be able to go to the college of my dreams without having to worry about the tuition. Even up until the last few days of my senior year, when people had already started applying to colleges, I was under the impression that once I got accepted into Caltech, they would make sure that everything was paid for because they had promised me and had been telling me that they would take care of everything for the past 4 years. However, when I finally got my acceptance letter from Caltech, they pulled a total 180 and told me that they would not be paying for me to go to college because Jared, unfortunately, had not been accepted into the college of his choice, and now they wanted me to go to a mediocre college with him just so that he wouldn't feel bad about himself. To be fair, he had been aiming for Cornell, which was pretty silly of him because his grades were definitely not up to the standard for a college like that. If I'm being honest, he had always been a very average and mediocre student, and I'm not saying that it's a bad thing. But then, never even trying to get better and setting your sights so high, that's just setting yourself up for failure. And that's what had happened. So, the day that my parents told me about how he had been rejected from Cornell and was going to have to settle for something else, and they wanted me to go along with him so that he wouldn't feel like a failure, I didn't even need to think twice before shutting that down. No matter what he had been through, I had been accepted into the college of my choice, and the most that I could do for him was extend my sympathies, but I was not going to give up on my dreams for him. I might have even considered it if Jared had been good to me at any point in his life, but we just never really got along from the beginning. Our parents had made sure to pit us against each other, and although I had tried to be friends with him several times, he always thought of himself as someone who was superior to me. I don't know on what basis, but he simply just believed that he was better than me or something. On top of that, our parents always treated him like he really was superior to everybody else, which just reinforced his baseless beliefs, and it got on my nerves. But I really couldn't help that, and in my childhood, I used to fight with my parents a lot over this. But they would always try to tell me that I was older than him, so I just had to accept that this is how it was instead of getting jealous. I occasionally complained to my maternal uncle about these things since he and I were pretty close, but that was all that I could do. Anyway, when my parents asked me if I would be willing to do that, I said no, and that's when they told me that if I did not agree to their terms, then they would be forced to go back on their word and would not be paying for me to go to college since I was not ready to make a sacrifice for my brother's happiness. I was infuriated at that point, and we got into a really horrible fight that day because what they were doing was so unethical on so many levels. They had given me false hope for 4 years, and that's the only reason I did not try to take up any jobs or any internships to earn some cash on the side. And I hadn't even spoken to anybody about student loans or whatever. It was going to be hard. I already knew that it would be very difficult for me to work through college and pay off my own tuition. I was in a very difficult position, and it was just because my parents were too selfish and could only care about Jared and did not even bother to think about what would become of me. Well, fighting with them did not work. I tried to beg and plead with them, and it was humiliating, but even then they did not agree. They were very firm on what they had said and believed that I should give up on Caltech just because they thought that I should value my brother's happiness more. I did not agree with that, and I tried to tell them that the thing that they were asking me to do, it was not a tiny little sacrifice, but it would be giving up on my future, and I would never be able to stand that. But they did not budge, and I realized that I was wasting my time talking to them pointlessly and trying to make them see sense when they had shown me very clearly where their priorities had been right from the beginning, and I had been a fool to ever trust them. So I packed some of my clothes and books and I left the house that evening itself. They did not try to stop me, and so I showed up at my uncle's house in the evening and told him everything. Like I had mentioned earlier in my post, he and I had always been close, and he had always been sympathetic to me. He often even tried to make my mother, his older sister, understand what I was going through and see things from my perspective as well. But unfortunately, it never worked. However, that day was the straw that broke the camel's back for me, and I finally told him that I could no longer live with my parents and I was counting on him to help me out somehow. I just wanted him to become a co-signer on my loan application, and then I would find a way to pay it all off. But I just needed his help for that one thing. I was in a pretty hysterical state when I got to his house, and he calmed me down, allowed me to talk about what was going on, and then after getting to know everything, he told me that he was going to take care of my tuition and I did not need to worry about it. I was thrilled when he said that because that meant that I would not need to worry about student loans or anything else since he had promised me that he was going to take care of all of it. And he really lived up to it as well because I was able to go to college and accept my position at the right time and he took care of all my expenses. He is a dentist and he makes good money, but spending it on me, his nephew, instead of saving it up for his future, that was a really benevolent gesture and I'm always going to be so thankful to him for it. Anyway, I've been in college for 1 year, and I haven't had any contact with my parents for the past year, since they did not try to reach out to me either. I guess they know what I'm up to since I've been posting updates on social media, and even though I block them, I still have other family members. From what I know, they have been in touch with the rest of the family apart from my uncle who cut my parents off as soon as he found out what they had done to me. I was not expecting to hear from them anytime soon, but last week, they decided to pay me a visit in college, and I was so surprised because it was really random and out of the blue. At first, I thought about avoiding them, but then just out of curiosity, I decided to meet them and we went out for lunch. Over lunch, they told me that they were really sorry about how things turned out and said that they wanted to make things right with me. It all seemed very shady, but I was willing to give them a chance. They had not brought Jared along with them, and when I asked about him, they told me that he had decided to take a gap year and was going to start applying to colleges this year again. They were trying to badmouth Jared in front of me when I asked about him and said that they were really disappointed in him and said that he was the real failure, which is another reason they wanted to make it up to me. And I was very suspicious throughout the whole thing, and towards the end of the evening, they proved me right by telling me that they had actually come to visit me with another motive in mind. And since I seemed to be having a good time, they thought that they would bring it up with me. They told me that they were in the talks with a really big investor for a deal, and they were desperate to have them on board because my parents had a catering business, and they were trying to get into the more high-end market. And this guy would be perfect for that since they could tie up with his event management business and do more upper-class events for better money. They needed me because apparently they had spoken to this guy a couple of times, and they were still trying to work certain things out. In a few days, before our meeting, he had mentioned that his younger son had been trying to get into Caltech, and my parents had bragged about me going there. And now he had asked my parents to attend a work party and bring me along because he wanted to introduce me to his son, so I could maybe give him tips or guide him or something. My parents had agreed to it, but by doing that, they had put themselves in a very difficult position since they were not exactly on speaking terms with me. And the real reason that they had visited me that day was to make things right with me so that they could bring me along to the party in a couple of days since they believed that this would help them crack the deal with this investor. My parents also wanted me to speak highly of them and maybe boost their image a little bit at the party. What was in this for me, you may ask? My parents told me that they knew that I had spoken to my uncle and asked him for help initially, but now they were willing to cover the rest of my expenses and college tuition and even give me double the amount of what I needed if I just helped them out with this. So, to sum it up, I was getting double the asking price and the only condition was that I would have to lie about how great my parents were to an investor and attend a party with them. It didn't sound like a bad deal, to be honest, so I agreed, but I had very different intentions. 3 days ago, I finally attended the party with my parents, and once we got there, I did what I had initially planned on doing and gave my parents a taste of their own medicine after promising them that I would do exactly what they had asked of me. When they introduced me to their potential investor, I decided to be as blunt as I could and told them the entire story. I started off by telling him that I was thankful to him for fixing the relationship between my parents and me, and when he looked confused, I decided to elaborate and told him how my parents had finally reached out to me after 1 year of not speaking to me just because they wanted to get an investment from him and bring him on board. So technically, I had him to thank for all of this. I also explained the rest of the story about how my parents had given me hope for 4 years and said that they would take care of my college expenses and then turned their backs on me at the very last minute just because my brother did not get into his dream college and they wanted me to give up on my dreams so it wouldn't hurt him. And after that, they cut me out of their lives because I had decided to do what was right for me. After telling him all of this, he and everybody in earshot looked flabbergasted, and most of all my parents, who had actually gone red in the face and were trying to avoid looking anybody in the eye. After that, I did not have much to do, so I just called a cab and I went back to campus since it was just a 45-minute drive back there. It's been completely chaotic since. My parents have been trying to get in touch with me and making several accounts on social media using different phone numbers and email IDs just because I blocked their original ones. They are blaming me for ruining their deal since their investor has stopped responding to them after what I said to him at the party. But that's not really what I have a problem with. I'm only here because of what my uncle said. I told him about what I had done days ago, and I thought that he would laugh along with me because I finally got back at my parents for what they had done to me 1 year back. But instead, he did not find it funny in the slightest and said that it was really vindictive and mean of me to do something like that. And he believed that I should have just told my parents that I was not interested in helping them out and let it be instead of going out of their way to do something like this. And since then, every time that we have spoken, he's been very weird and cold towards me, and I feel bad. So, am I the asshole? For exposing my parents at a work event after promising them that I would help them out? Update 1. So it's been 1 week since the party, and from what I have read, everybody in the comments is pretty much divided on whether I did the right thing or not. And it has just led to more confusion for me. I had been relying on this thread to help me make a decision, but then I decided that I should just go with what my heart says, and I called my uncle up to have a discussion with him. I did not want to speak with him on the phone about something like this, so I asked him if I could visit and if we could speak in person, and he agreed. So I went to his house yesterday. Once I was there, it was pretty awkward because we hadn't had a proper conversation in the last 1 week after what I had told him. So when I got there, things were very tense. But then I decided to break the ice and I told him that I did not think that I needed to be guilty or apologize to my parents for what had happened. But since he was somebody whose opinion I actually valued, I thought that I would talk things out with him and explain why I did what I did. He seemed receptive, so I told him that my parents had been promising me for 4 years that they would help me out. And at the very last minute, it just hurt that they had ditched me for my brother just to protect his feelings. If they had refused to pay for me to go to college because of other reasons like financial constraints, I might not have been as pissed as I was. But they genuinely expected me to give up on my dreams for my brother's sake and got mad at me when I chose not to. That's what really hurt me. He had already known about this, but I still thought that talking to him about it from an emotional aspect would make him realize how hurt I had been. I also told him that I had always been treated like I wasn't a priority, even though I had always tried my best to make my parents proud. It just never seemed to be enough, and I had a lot of built-up resentment against them. And on the day of the party, I just decided that I would make sure that they knew what they had done was messed up and I could screw them over when it came down to it. I was not going to be taken for a fool. The fact that my parents had even expected me to take them up on their stupid little deal and pretend that I was on their side just for money was insulting. So I told my uncle that he was free to not speak to me if he wanted to, but that meant that I would not be taking any financial help from him either. It was pretty bold of me to say that since I did not have any other plan in mind and I didn't know what would have happened if we were not able to sort things out. But when I said that, my uncle seemed to soften up a little and said that it was not necessary for me to get mad at him. He was just upset that I had chosen to get revenge instead of just letting it all go and let it be in the past. Then, he very calmly explained to me that revenge was never the way to get ahead in life, and I agreed with him. I told him that I knew what I had done was probably not the right or ethical thing to do, but I thought that it was necessary for me to do it. And now that it was done, I was never going to look back again. So we were not able to come to a decision about whether or not I did the right thing, but at least we were able to sort out our differences and clear the air because when I left, we were cracking jokes and making light of the situation. So I think things are okay now. The only problem on my plate is my parents, who are still desperately trying to get in touch with me, but I've just been ignoring them. I honestly don't know what to do about them, so I guess I'm just going to have to continue ignoring them until they realize that trying to message me again and again is not going to help their case. Update 2. Hey, so it's been 10 days since the day of the party, and so far, my parents had only been trying to text me and get on my nerves like that. But this evening, they actually showed up at my college to pay me a visit once again. When I told the receptionist I was not willing to go and see them, she told me that they were refusing to leave unless I came down and spoke to them. So that forced me to get out of my room and actually go to them. I was scared that they would embarrass me on campus, so I decided to go to a nearby diner along with them, and this time, even Jared had come along. The scary part was that I guess Jared had not exactly spent the last year doing nothing at home. It was obvious that he had been going to the gym and he had become really buff in just a year because while we used to be almost the same size when I had left home, he was really jacked now and was giving me really nasty looks and flexing his muscles. I'm pretty sure he was just there to intimidate me, which was partly hilarious and partly scary because from the looks of it, I was sure that he would definitely have beaten me up if given the opportunity. Thankfully, it did not come down to that. My parents were only there to talk to me about what I had done at the party and said the things that I had said were absolutely not necessary, and they wanted me to put out a public post on social media taking back what I had said and admit that I had made it all up so that their reputation would remain intact. They told me that the investor had blocked them everywhere after the day of the party and they wanted me to set the record straight. I made it very clear that I was not going to do anything like that since even they knew that I was speaking the truth. Yet again, they tried to buy me out and said that they would write me a check for whatever amount I demanded if I did what they asked me. But I told them that they couldn't buy everything with money and certainly couldn't buy me with money. After saying that to them, when I tried to get up and leave, my dad lost his mind and he literally banged his fist on the table that we were sitting at and said that I was not allowed to leave until we had this thing sorted out. That earned us a few looks from the other people at the diner, and I know the owner, so I was able to give him one and he did not kick us out because he could see that something was going on. Anyway, when my dad did that, I started losing my temper too, and I really wasn't scared of Jared because I knew that even if he tried to hit me or something, the owner was right there and he would immediately call the cops. So I decided to stand up to them and I told my dad that he had lost the right to tell me what I was allowed to do and not allowed to do when he decided that he was not going to cover my college tuition and I left home. I was an adult now and was not relying on them for anything, so their rules do not apply to me anymore, and I made that very clear to them. So my mother tried to play the "oh, we raised you and this is how you repay us" card with me, but I cut that out really quick and told them that they only did what was absolutely necessary for me, and it was not like they treated me like a king like they did to Jared. They had always been biased towards him and had even been fine with that because they had given me hopes that eventually they would stand up for me when it really came down to it and provide for me and pay my college tuition. But they did not even live up to that promise. I had pretty much raised myself because all they cared about was my brother, not me. After that, they did not have anything to say, and I told them that I was sleeping and if they ever tried to pull some nasty crap with me again, I would definitely call the cops on them, and I would even file for a restraining order against all of them. Then I finally left and now I'm back in my dorm room, and in a while, I'm going to call my uncle and tell him everything that has happened today. Update 3. Hi. So it's been a month since I last posted here. After my last update, I kinda got really busy with studying and stuff. I have my finals in a couple of days. Anyway, after my last interaction with my parents, they decided not to bother me for a few days. I also talked to my uncle about what happened, and as ridiculous as it sounds, I mentioned to him that I was pretty sure that they had brought Jared along to intimidate me because that's what it really looked like. Maybe I was being paranoid, but I didn't want to risk anything. So I told my uncle that I did not feel safe because of them anymore, and I wanted to file for a restraining order against them. My uncle told me that he was completely fine with that decision and said that he would arrange for a lawyer as quickly as he could. I was skeptical about how things would work out, but coincidentally, the day that I decided to file for a restraining order was the very day that Jared himself showed up at my college, and once again, he started demanding that I come down to see him. And this time, when I went down, I made sure that I confronted him right in the middle of the lobby so that it would be in a public space, and even if he tried to do something, it would be on camera. He told me that our parents were really upset because of me, and he wanted me to do what they had asked of me and post that apology on social media. And when I said no, he told me that I had to or else he would make sure that I faced the consequences. And I, without thinking, told him that I wasn't scared of a no-good idiot like him, and that's when it happened. He punched me, and thankfully, it was all caught on camera, so that's going to make getting the restraining order a lot easier. I was also able to dodge it, and instead of hitting me right in the middle of my face, he ended up catching my cheek. And I'm not going to lie, even though that hurts a lot, it's still a better alternative to getting my nose broken or something like that, because that pain might have been so bad that I wouldn't have been able to focus on studying. Anyway, the bottom line is that we are easily going to be able to get a restraining order against my family, and I'm really thankful for that. Now I'm just going to focus on doing well in my exams and make sure that I score well, because I have a lot to prove, and I'm going to make sure that I do great things and show my family their place. Thank you so much to everybody who has supported me in the comments and has reached out to me. It means a great deal that so many people have bothered to read and keep themselves updated on what's going on with me. I think I'm going to take a break for now, and I'll be back when I'm rich and successful. Hopefully, LOL. Now on to the next story. Story 3. My parents sold my car when I was traveling to fund my golden child sister's vacation because of her divorce. I'm 32 years old, working as an IT professional, and I've worked my ass off to get where I am today. But before I dive into the mess that's become my life, you need to understand my family. I grew up in a typical middle-class household. My dad is in the marketing industry, and my mom's a homemaker. From the outside, everything seems pretty normal, but inside those walls, things were far from perfect. You see, I have a younger sister, Lily, who's 28 now. From the day she was born, she was the apple of my parents' eye. It was like they had won the lottery the day she arrived. I don't know if it was because she was the youngest or because she was a girl, but Lily could do no wrong in their eyes. Meanwhile, I was the kid who had to earn everything. If I wanted something, I had to work for it. My parents weren't cruel or anything, but the favoritism was so blatant that it was impossible to ignore. Growing up, it was always about Lily. If she wanted something, it was hers. If I wanted something, I had to prove I deserved it, and even then, it was never a sure thing. It was like they saw me as a future investment, someone who needed to be toughened up for the real world, while Lily was the delicate flower that needed to be protected at all costs. It didn't matter what I did. Lily was always the priority. Lily, of course, thrived under this treatment. She learned early on that if she cried loud enough or threw a big enough tantrum, she'd get exactly what she wanted. And believe me, she wasn't shy about using that power. By the time she was a teenager, she had my parents wrapped around her little finger. She never had to work a day in her life, not even for pocket money. Everything she wanted was handed to her on a silver platter. I remember one time when we were kids, I'd saved up for months to buy this new video game console. It was all I talked about for weeks. The day I finally had enough money, I rushed out and bought it. But when I got home, Lily threw a fit because she wanted it too. My parents didn't just tell her no. Instead, they took it from me and said we had to share. Except it wasn't really sharing. Lily got it whenever she wanted, and I had to wait until she was done, which was almost never. It wasn't just about the material things either. Lily could manipulate situations to get whatever she wanted. If she wanted to go somewhere, my parents would drop everything to make it happen. If she didn't want to do something, they'd make excuses for her. I can't tell you how many times I was left to fend for myself because Lily needed their attention for something ridiculous. And every time I tried to stand up for myself, I was told to stop being selfish, that I should be more understanding because she was younger and more sensitive. So I learned to stay out of the way. I focused on my studies, worked part-time jobs, and saved up every penny I could. As soon as I was able, I moved out of that house. I got a decent job, bought a modest car, nothing fancy, but it was mine, and started building a life of my own. I thought I was finally free from their toxicity. Little did I know, I was wrong. Lily got married at 24 to a man named Thomas. He was older, wealthy, and honestly way out of her league. My parents were over the moon. They saw it as Lily finally living up to her potential, marrying into money and securing her place in high society. The wedding was a pretty big affair. Of course, all funded by Thomas's family. My parents couldn't have been prouder if they tried. They saw this marriage as their ticket to a better life through Lily. But Lily was still Lily. She had no concept of money because she'd never had to work for anything. She spent Thomas's money like water, buying expensive clothes, jewelry, and taking luxury vacations. I remember sitting through family dinners where my parents would gush over how well Lily was doing, how perfect her life was, and how lucky she was to have found such a generous husband. Meanwhile, I was busting my ass at work, but none of that mattered to them. The cracks in Lily's marriage started showing pretty quickly. Thomas wasn't the type to tolerate her spending habits for long. They argued constantly, and Lily would come crying to our parents, who always took her side. They blamed Thomas for everything, saying he wasn't treating her the way she deserved to be treated. I could see the writing on the wall long before it happened. Divorce was inevitable. And sure enough, after 4 years, Lily was back living with my parents, her marriage in shambles. Lily had actually signed the prenuptial agreement with Thomas, which meant she couldn't get anything out of the divorce, which was extremely smart of him. My parents were devastated, not just for Lily, but for themselves. They had banked on this marriage being their way into a higher social circle, and now it was over. But instead of letting Lily face the consequences of her actions, they doubled down on their favoritism. They coddled her even more, showering her with gifts, paying for expensive vacations to help her heal, and making sure she never had to deal with the reality of her situation. Lily was more spoiled than ever, and my parents were completely blind to it. To them, Lily was the victim and they were her saviors. They didn't care about how much it cost them or what it meant for their own financial security. They were determined to keep their princess happy no matter the cost. And once again, I was left to watch from the sidelines, disgusted but powerless to do anything about it. Things took a turn for the worse a few months ago when I got a great opportunity at work. It was a short-term assignment that required me to travel frequently. The pay was excellent, and it was a chance to gain some valuable experience. Since I didn't need my car while traveling, I decided to leave it at my parents' house. It was close to the airport, and I trusted that they'd take care of it. I'd always taken pride in my car. It was a symbol of my independence, a reminder that I'd made it on my own terms. Leaving my car there seemed like a no-brainer. I knew my parents weren't thrilled about the divorce and all the drama with Lily, but I figured the car would be safe there. I was wrong, so very wrong. After 2 months of traveling, I came back home for a weekend visit. I was tired from all the work and just wanted to relax. But when I pulled up to my parents' house, something felt off. My car wasn't in the driveway. At first, I thought maybe they'd parked it in the garage. But when I asked my mom where the car was, she just looked at me with this blank expression and said, "Oh, we sold it to someone." I remember standing there, just staring at her, not able to process what she was saying. "You sold it?" I finally asked, thinking this had to be some kind of sick joke. "Yes," she replied, like it was the most normal thing in the world. "We needed the money." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "What do you mean you needed the money? That was my car." She didn't even flinch. "Well, Lily's been having such a hard time with her divorce, and we wanted to do something special for her. So we sold the car and used the money to send her on a vacation to Europe. She needed it more than you did." At that moment, something inside me snapped. This wasn't just favoritism anymore. This was outright betrayal. They had sold my car without even asking me, and all for Lily. And the worst part was, they didn't even seem to care. I felt anger like I'd never felt before. "How could you do that?" I demanded. "That was my car. I worked for years to save up for that, and you just sold it like it was nothing." My dad, who had been silent up until this point, finally chimed in. "It's just a car, son. You can always buy another one. But Lily needed this. She's been through so much, and we wanted to help her." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "So you think her needing a vacation is more important than my car? You think it's okay to just take something that belongs to me and sell it without even asking?" My mom sighed like she was dealing with a child throwing a tantrum. "You're overreacting. We did what we had to do for the family. Lily needed us, and we did what was necessary. You're doing well for yourself. You can afford to buy another car. She needed this to recover." Their lack of remorse, their complete disregard for how I might feel, was like a punch to the gut. I couldn't believe that after everything I'd done for them, they would treat me like this. I was furious, but more than that, I was hurt. I had always been the responsible one, the one who did the right thing, and this was how they repaid me. As if things couldn't get worse, Lily walked in at that moment, fresh off her European vacation. She looked tanned, rested, and completely unbothered by the whole situation. "Oh, you're back," she said with a smile, completely ignoring the tension in the room. I turned to her, my anger boiling over. "Did you know they sold my car to pay for your vacation?" She didn't even blink. "Yeah, they mentioned it. I thought you wouldn't mind." "You thought I wouldn't mind? That was my car. My car that I worked years to save up for, and you just took it without asking." Lily rolled her eyes like I was being unreasonable. "It's just a car, bro. You can always buy another one. Besides, I really needed this vacation. It was the only thing that's made me feel better since the divorce. You should be happy for me." Happy for her? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was beyond entitlement. This was pure narcissism. I could feel my blood pressure rising. This wasn't just about the car. This was about years of being overlooked, ignored, and treated like I didn't matter. And now they had finally crossed a line that I couldn't ignore. I didn't say anything else. I just turned and walked out of the house. I needed to get out of there before I did something I'd regret. But as I drove away, my mind was already racing with thoughts of how I could make them pay for what they'd done. In the days that followed, I couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. My parents had taken something that was mine and sold it without a second thought. And Lily? She was completely unapologetic. She didn't care about what it cost me as long as she got what she wanted. It was time to put an end to this. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me anymore. I started planning my revenge. It wasn't just about getting back at them for the car. It was about making them realize that they couldn't keep treating me like this. I had always been the responsible one, the one who made sacrifices for the sake of the family. But not anymore. This time, I was going to put myself first. The first thing I did was cut them off financially. Over the years, I'd helped them out in more ways than I could count. I'd lent them money, helped them pay bills, and even set up a joint account for emergencies. But after what they did, I wasn't going to support them anymore. I withdrew all the money from the joint account and closed it. I also took back the credit card I'd given them for essentials. If they wanted to live beyond their means, they'd have to figure it out on their own. But that was just the beginning. I knew that my parents relied on me for more than just money. I had helped them with their finances, managed their accounts, and even handled their taxes. Without me, they were clueless. So I decided to make things even more difficult for them. I went through all the accounts I had access to and started systematically cutting them off. They had a backup car that I'd helped them purchase, and guess what? It was in my name. I sold it to recoup some of my losses, leaving them without a vehicle. The fallout was immediate. My parents were furious when they realized what I'd done. They called me repeatedly, demanding that I return the money, the car, everything. But I ignored them. I was done being their doormat. If they wanted to continue their lavish lifestyle, they'd have to do it without my help. For the first time in my life, I had the upper hand. My parents were in shock. They had never expected me to stand up to them like this. They tried everything to guilt-trip me. My mom called, crying, saying that I was being cruel, that they were just trying to help Lily during a difficult time. My dad tried to reason with me, saying that family was more important than money and that I was overreacting. But I wasn't buying it. I'd heard all their excuses before, and I was done listening. This wasn't about money. It was about respect. They had never respected me, never valued what I brought to the table. They had taken me for granted for too long, and now they were paying the price. Lily, of course, was livid. She came to my apartment, demanding that I fix everything, saying that I was ruining her life. But I stood my ground. I told her that she needed to start taking responsibility for her own actions and that I wasn't going to bail her out anymore. She didn't take it well, to say the least. She screamed at me, called me every name in the book, and even threatened to cut me out of her life. But I didn't care. In fact, I welcomed it. If being cut off from Lily meant not having to deal with her drama anymore, then so be it. I was done sacrificing my own happiness for the sake of my family. As for my family, I went no contact. They tried to reach out a few times, but I ignored their calls and texts. I knew that if I let them back into my life, nothing would change. They would go back to their old ways, and I would end up right where I started. I wasn't going to let that happen. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. And for the first time in a long time, I was truly happy. Update. It's been a while since I last shared my story, and a lot has happened since then. For those who don't know, I cut off contact with my parents and my sister Lily after they sold my car without my permission to fund Lily's lavish vacation. The betrayal was the last straw in a long history of favoritism and mistreatment. Since then, I've made some significant changes in my life, and I wanted to provide an update on what's happened. The reason I'm sharing this update is because I've been reflecting on everything that's happened, and I think it's important to share where I am now. The advice and support I received after my original post were overwhelming, and they helped me navigate the difficult decisions I had to make. I want to share what's been going on, how my family has responded, and where I stand now. When I first posted about what happened, I didn't expect the sheer volume of responses that poured in. The general consensus was clear. I wasn't wrong to cut off my family, and most people agreed that it was a long overdue step toward reclaiming my own life. Initially, reading through the comments was both validating and overwhelming. I'd always known that my family's behavior wasn't normal, but seeing so many people agree with me and affirm my feelings was something I hadn't anticipated. It made me realize just how much I've been gaslit over the years into thinking I was overreacting or being selfish for wanting to stand up for myself. One of the most common pieces of advice I received was to stay firm in my decision and not to let guilt or manipulation pull me back into their toxic orbit. It was advice I took to heart. I knew that if I allowed myself to be drawn back in, nothing would change, and I'd end up in the same miserable situation I'd been in for years. After I went no contact, it didn't take long for my parents to start trying to reach out. At first, they bombarded me with calls and messages, which I ignored. When that didn't work, they started showing up at my apartment, trying to talk to me in person. This was when I decided to take more serious action. I filed for a restraining order against them, which was granted, given the harassment and emotional distress they were causing. Even with the restraining order in place, my parents found ways to get messages to me. They had friends and extended family members send emails or leave voicemails on their behalf. The messages were a mix of apologies, excuses, and guilt trips. They'd say things like, "We're so sorry for what happened. We never meant to hurt you," followed by, "But you have to understand, Lily was going through a tough time and we were just trying to help her." It was the same pattern as before, apologizing just enough to make it seem like they were remorseful but never fully taking responsibility for their actions. They still didn't understand, or maybe they didn't want to understand, that what they did was wrong not just because they sold my car, but because of how they had always put Lily first no matter the cost to me. Lily, on the other hand, took a different approach. She tried to play the victim, sending me long emotional messages about how sorry she was and how much she needed me in her life. She claimed that she'd had a wake-up call after I cut her off and that she was working on becoming a better person. But her words felt hollow to me. I'd seen her act remorseful before, only to go right back to her old ways once she got what she wanted. This message was also sent through a family member. Despite her claims of change, Lily's messages were still laced with entitlement. She would say things like, "I know I messed up, but we're family and family should always forgive each other." It was clear that she still believed she was owed forgiveness simply because she was my sister, not because she had truly changed. My response to all of this was simple. I didn't respond at all. I knew that engaging with them would only open the door for more manipulation, and I wasn't willing to go down that road again. With the restraining order in place and my family's attempts at reconciliation falling flat, I turned my attention to more practical matters, namely the financial and legal fallout from cutting them off. One of the first things I did was to ensure that my finances were completely secure. I closed all joint accounts, changed passwords, and even moved my money to a different bank. I didn't want to give them any opportunity to try and manipulate me financially, which was something they had done in the past. I also had to deal with the legal process of getting compensation for my car, which had been sold without my permission. The legal battle was long and drawn out, but eventually, I did receive compensation. It wasn't as much as I had hoped for, but it was enough to help me move on. I used the money to upgrade my new car, which felt like a small victory. As for my parents, their financial situation took a significant hit after I cut them off. Without my support, they struggled to maintain the lifestyle they had become accustomed to. They were forced to downsize, selling their home and moving into a smaller, less expensive place. I heard through mutual contacts that they were having a hard time adjusting, but I had no sympathy. They had spent years living beyond their means, counting on me to bail them out when things got tough. Now they were finally facing the consequences of their actions. Lily's situation was even more precarious. Without the financial cushion provided by our parents, she was forced to get a job, something she had never done before. From what I heard, she struggled to hold down any position for long. Her entitled attitude and lack of work ethic made her a nightmare employee, and she bounced from job to job, never lasting more than a few weeks at any place. Despite her claims of wanting to change, it was clear that Lily hadn't learned anything from the situation. She continued to live in a fantasy world where she was the victim and everyone else was to blame for her problems. Her financial independence was more of a facade than a reality, and it wasn't long before she started reaching out to extended family members, trying to guilt them into supporting her. The decision to go no contact was one of the hardest I've ever made, but it was also the most necessary. It wasn't just about punishing them for what they did. It was about protecting myself from further harm. I realized that as long as they were in my life, I would never be truly free. I would always be caught in their web of manipulation, guilt, and favoritism. In the months since, I found a sense of peace that I never thought was possible. That's not to say that it's been easy. There are still moments when I feel guilty, when I wonder if I made the right choice. But then I remind myself of everything I endured, and I know that I did what was necessary to protect my own well-being. As for the possibility of reconciliation, I've thought about it a lot. I won't lie and say that the idea hasn't crossed my mind. After all, they're still my family, and there's a part of me that misses the connection we once had, even if it was toxic. But I also know that any reconciliation would come with conditions, boundaries that they would have to respect, and a genuine acknowledgement of the harm they've caused. If I were to even consider reconnecting with them, they would need to take full responsibility for their actions, not just in the recent past, but for the years of favoritism and manipulation that I endured. They would need to show that they've changed, that they're willing to respect my boundaries and treat me as an equal, not as someone who exists solely to serve their needs. Lily, too, would need to demonstrate that she's truly changed. I would need to see real, tangible evidence that she's taken steps to become a better person, whether that's holding down a job, learning to be financially independent, or simply showing more empathy and consideration for others. But the truth is, I'm not sure if they're capable of that kind of change. They've spent so many years in their toxic patterns that I don't know if they can break free from them. And I'm not willing to sacrifice my own happiness and well-being on the slim chance that they might change. That said, thank you to everyone who has supported me so far. Your advice and encouragement have meant the world to me, and I'm grateful to have this community to turn to as I continue on this journey. Now on to the next story. Story 4. I kicked out my sister-in-law and her family for leaving bloodied sanitary products around my house. Now my in-laws are demanding I take them back. My husband has 2 brothers and 1 sister. His sister and her husband are not my favorite people in the world. Recently, they have been couch surfing as they lost their home. A long story which could have been avoided if they had adult, like they should have. First, they stayed with my in-laws, but they used the excuse that my father-in-law has diabetes to get rid of them and their rowdy children. Next was his older brother and his wife. They had 2 spare rooms as 2 of their older children moved out a year ago, and they only have the 6-year-old and their 13-year-old twins at home. After 3 weeks, they had to move out due to a planned refurbishment. They were happy with them as they were generally tidy and helped out in the home. The youngest brother was the next to take them in. While my sister-in-law was there, she helped out in the home and kept her children on a leash. The youngest brother's wife is very house-proud, and she allowed them to stay for a limited time only, as they have had a baby recently and her mother will be staying with them to help out for the first 6 months. Then they emotionally manipulated my husband to say, okay. I agreed to it on the condition that she and her husband, as well as their children, keep the place clean because in the past, the only place they are messy in is my home. For example, if they are throwing something into the kitchen bin, they will throw it in the general direction of it and not in the actual bin. It's extra gross when it's foodstuff that dries up and stinks out the place. Similar things happened in the past where she would leave her sanitary towels on top of the bin lid in the bathroom instead of in the bin. Her oldest daughter started her periods recently, and I asked the younger brother's wife how things were for tidiness. She said she had no complaints. They went to bed on time and kept the place clean. However, they were there for only 2 weeks. They are always tidy at the other houses. I know this from experience, too, during Christmas and summer holidays when we stay over at each other's places. I have seen the difference in how they are at my place and the other places. Before they moved in, I made the younger brother and my parents-in-law witnesses to them agreeing to keeping my house as clean as it is and to chip in with chores. If they broke the rules, they would be out immediately. She fussed and denied past wrongdoings but said, "As you wish, Your Highness," sarcastically. The first 5 days were smooth sailing. This morning I found a sanitary towel on top of the bin and not even wrapped properly. That is not all. Her daughter is staying in my daughter's room, and she made a mess of the shampoo and conditioner in her bathroom and had left a tampon on the side of the sink, forgetting it from last night. Her husband leaves early for work, and the kitchen was a mess when I finally got downstairs. I have a curious toddler, and I don't want him to pick up a bloodied sanitary towel. I knocked on the guest room and told her to pack her shit and get out. She looked angry and tried to play innocent. She said it was only some blood and to chuck it in the bin if it bothered me so much. I told her no and picked up her suitcase, throwing their stuff in it. At first she wouldn't leave the house, saying she was going to wait for her brother as she doesn't take orders from me. But I told her, this house belongs to me too. I dropped her and her youngest ones off at my in-laws a few hours ago. Her husband came back from work, and when I wouldn't let him in, he made a scene. He went to my in-laws, but they don't want them there due to father-in-law's illness. When my husband returned from work, my in-laws turned up in our driveway with her and her family within 20 minutes. They are still standing outside and squabbling about being let in. I refused to open the door and told my husband if he backs down, he isn't welcome in our home either. So the family thinks, am I the a-hole because I have never liked her and I'm using any excuse to get rid of her? Comments. Comment 1. I would have taken photos of the sanitary items left out and sent it on a giant group chat saying, anyone who thinks you're a monster for having a problem with this is more than happy to come and clean it themselves or host the family themselves. NTA. Deleted. Jesus. Do you know the ramifications of medical waste? Lord have mercy, that's aggressively gross. I just can't. Comment 2. I used to work for a surgeon, so I've seen some pretty gross things, but even this is hugely disgusting. Comment 3. Clearly she's doing it on purpose because she doesn't like you. There's no way that they are perfect guests everywhere else but wreck your house without it being intentional. Opie. That is exactly what I told my husband. He says maybe, excuse them this once, and if they do it again, give them consequences. Comment 4. No. Not only will she do it again, but it gives them proof they can manipulate into going against you. Comment 5. Nope, you don't want them to claim squatters' rights or something and be stuck with them. You were clear on the rules. Comment 6. NTA. It should have been done the second the a-hole called you, Your Highness. Comment 7. See, this right here is the problem. Being sarcastic just now lost you the right to stay at my house. Good luck and FK off. Should have been the appropriate response. Comment 8. You don't have a sister-in-law, you have a husband problem. It sounds like your husband would be okay with your toddler picking up a used tampon and taking a taste like toddlers do. There is a good chance they were not cleaning up after themselves at the other homes because there was a very convenient pre-existing disease. Then a refurbishment. Then another family member staying for 6 months. I'm willing to bet the others lied to you, so you would be stuck with her. Her choice to F around and find out. NTA. Update 1. Yesterday my driveway looked like a scene from some Mexican standoff. They were out there discussing the matter while I refused to go out and engage. After 2 hours, yes, 2 whole hours, they left. They are currently at my in-laws, but they made a promise to return to discuss the matter tomorrow as everyone will be home from work. And that way we could all find a workable solution. Well, at least that is what my husband relayed. When my husband got inside, I told him that I would not have them in my house. I told him that he could clean up after them, which he did. After cleaning up, he asked me why I made him do that. I told him I was just as grossed out over other people's bodily fluids as he was, and unlike him, I wasn't biologically related to them. So if he found it unsavory, imagine how shitty I felt in the past cleaning up after them. He promised to buy a new bin and bleach the sink 3 times. Our strategy for tomorrow is that under no circumstances are they coming to live with us. His niece will be made to clean up the bathroom shampoo and conditioner mess. He left that part for her in the meantime. Our daughter can use our shower. We'll see how this turns out tomorrow. Comments. Comment 1. Good, stand your ground on this. Sounds like sister-in-law wants to mess with you and has instructed her daughter to do the same. And WTF, why is your husband asking why he should clean? The question should be why he thinks you should. Comment 2. More like her daughter has learned the bad manners from her mom. She's just following in mom's footsteps. Comment 3. If I were you, I would not let the niece back into the house. Yes, she made the mess, but the whole point is to get them out, not let them back in to clean. Bite the bullet and clean up the niece's mess. No reason to re-enter your home if the mess is taken care of. Have hubby clean up the mess. Comment 4. I agree. Do not let the niece in to clean. Your in-laws will use it as a way to get in. Pay a professional service to clean your daughter's bathroom and hand a copy of the bill to Bill and sister-in-law. Obviously, they won't pay you back, but let them know if any relatives try to get you to take them in again. You will share pictures and a copy of the bill via text, WhatsApp, or whatever social media family uses. They are so disgusting. I would never allow them in my home and would trespass them from my property. Comment 5. I had a buddy who was temporarily homeless for about 6 weeks. He crashed on my couch. I barely knew the dude lived there. He'd be up and out the door before I left for work. Sheets and blankets on the couch would be neatly folded. His bags would be stacked in a corner and the bathroom would be same as it would have been if I was the only one living here. He knew I was doing him a solid, so he was respectful of my home and my space. One would think that if you and your family were technically homeless that you would not be such inconsiderate slobs. Opie. Your buddy had common sense and decency. My sister-in-law not so much. Update 2. Yesterday was a long day. At my in-laws, we went early to get it over and done with. My in-laws started with the guilt trip. First they mentioned that they would take them in until they found a place, but due to father-in-law's diabetes, it wouldn't be good for his health. I told them to tell their daughter to parent her children so they wouldn't run around like monkeys. That way they could stay with them as they have spare bedrooms. That didn't land well with sister-in-law. She went on a tirade of how I have always been jealous of her and that I was trying to drive a wedge between her and her brother. I told her she didn't like her own life, so me being jealous of her and her life was a stretch that required suspension of reality. She asked my husband if he was okay with me telling him what to do with his family as he always stays out of my family's business. She told him to lay down the law and tell me that his sister and her family would stay as long as it took them to find a new place to stay. My husband was having none of that. He told her that the house was mine just as much his and it was a 2 yes and 1 no deal. Just because I was a stay-at-home now didn't mean that I didn't contribute to buying the house when I was working. The younger brother and his wife said they wouldn't be able to host them as they had his mother-in-law staying due to the baby. The older ones mentioned the refurbishments. Both the younger and the older one's wives said that I was making it up about the cleanliness as she always kept her own house clean and kept their places clean. They told me to suck it up and act like family. I told them I wasn't there to argue about her cleanliness as I saw what I saw and her brother was witness to it and had to clean it up. He confirmed that he did and that I wasn't making it up. My sister-in-law slipped up and said, "Why did you clean it up?" To her brother, because according to her, I was meant to clean it up. Either she is the dumbest beach alive to admit it or she knows she has the whole family in her pocket. Either way, I made it clear she wasn't going to stay with me, and because she got along much better with everyone else in the family, they would figure out something around their own lives. My husband told his niece that she was old enough to clean up the remaining mess, but she said no. Her father jumped in and said, "She is your niece but my daughter. Don't you dare tell her what to do." It got heated between them, so they both had to walk it off. I told her and her husband that the only reason me and my husband were there was to get money back for the bin we had to throw out due to her sprinkling biohazards around the house. She laughed in my face and said it would never happen. I said, "Fine. I hope you realize that when I threw you out, I didn't pack all your belongings." I still had her daughter's Switch, her husband's and her two younger ones' tablets and some of her jewelry and a few other bits and pieces as it all happened so quickly that day. It would all be sold to recuperate my cost. We left, but she was yelling loudly about what she would do to me if I dared to sell anything. My husband has my back, and he said, "Go ahead and sell whatever you need to." Later on, they kept texting my husband to do them one last favor by putting up with her for a few months until she got back on her feet. I told him that no matter what, I wouldn't agree to let her, her sloppy husband, and her horde of children back in. They texted me too, guilting me about his niece's education with no place to stay close to her school. She might have to start at another school if they get a rental which isn't in the school zone. I texted back, "Tough luck," and blocked them. My husband won't block his parents but was pissed at his brothers for telling him that he was selfish to not take them in as they were in a hard place in their lives. They did admit it was gross but excused her behavior by texting that maybe I did something to aggravate it. To top this off, the oldest wife left a voice message through her husband's number to my husband's WhatsApp. She said, "I kid you not. You are still okay to watch her 6-year-old on Tuesdays and Wednesdays like usual?" I told him to say, "Figure out what the answer to that request is." So that is where we are at now. Comments. Comment 1. Good for your husband sticking up for and backing you up. I can't believe the audacity of this family, still expecting you to watch their child after all this. Opie. The sister-in-law is not asking me to watch her child. The older brother's wife wants me to continue watching her child as I have done up until now. She works full-time and overtime on those days. I no longer feel like helping her out. Comment 2. Oh, yes. I realized that. I don't know how she thinks it's okay after they all berated you for this. I don't blame you for not wanting to do it. I'd want nothing to do with the family after this. Comment 3. She called your husband about it. Not you. This entire clan believes you are unworthy of basic respect. I can't believe they thought they would get what they want from bullying you more. Most people with sense would have tried abject apologies and promises to do better. Comment 4. Sure, we treat you badly, expecting you to clean up biohazards that decent people wouldn't expect of a paid house cleaner. But you're the selfish one for refusing to be a doormat and take the abuse and filth thrown your way. Your in-laws are ridiculous. All of them. Is your husband appalled by the lot? They expect you to keep babysitting? You know they are showing up with the kiddo as usual even though they treated you like crap. Then, of course, it's birthdays and holidays with the guilt trips. Comment 5. Lord, now I need another update on what he tells them about the 6-year-old. Wow, I don't think I've ever seen such a combination of audacious and entitled and simply cruel behaviors all wrapped into one horrific family. So sorry you had to deal with any of this. Even 5 days of that was an insult. Your husband should be forever sorrowful for making you endure. Update 3. Went to pick up my children and had to stick around a little longer as a new family is moving to the area. The parents wanted to meet their children's classmates' parents, so we had a small meet and greet. The office brought my husband's older brother's daughter, the 6-year-old, to me as I am the one that usually picks her up, and on Tuesdays and Wednesdays she stays with me. No one had picked her up, and when her teacher noticed me waiting in the hallway, she asked an office admin to bring her to me, thinking I was delayed due to meeting with the new parents. I told them that I wasn't responsible for her anymore on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. They took her back to the office and they must have called her mother. When I returned home from the meet and greet, my husband said his parents had called him and spoken their mind to him about me abandoning their granddaughter. They also put his older brother's wife on the phone and she had a shouting match with my husband. The sister-in-law I kicked out also had a few words with him. It ended with my husband telling his parents that they had lost the privilege to talk to him for a week and he would only unblock them when they give him and me a sincere apology. He explained that it was up to the parents to make pickup arrangements when I had made it clear I would no longer provide free services. The sister-in-law I kicked out is staying with her parents for now. Her husband and her younger two and two of the older ones are staying with my in-laws. The other older two are, and the other two younger ones are spread between the other two houses, but they made an indirect threat saying it would be a very temporary arrangement, as she promised it wouldn't take long for her to make her brothers see the light. I think I am in for a long ride. Comments. Comment 1. Like, I think they can't get any more crazy, and they continue to astound me. I can't even imagine being in your shoes. Good luck with the crazy. I hope you all hold your boundaries. Comment 2. Time for OP to update her security system. Get new cameras outside and inside the common areas of her property. Block access to all socials and phone numbers and give the school explicit instructions followed by a confirmation email that under no circumstances is anyone but her husband permitted to remove the kids from school. Crazy BCH rabies is not age or gender specific. OP needs to take precautions. Comment 3. You're not kidding. They seem like very Lifetime movie psycho type of people. Comment 4. So the sister-in-law you kicked out has 8 kids? OP? Yes. I think I mentioned that in the comments of the original post. Comment 5. Didn't read the comments? We'll go back and do that now. Do you know why she hates you? OP. No idea. I have always treated her with respect. Comment 6. So clearly the sister-in-law can't work with 8 kids, but they've been couch surfing with various family members for months. Did they give any idea when they'll actually get their own place again? OP. None. When they are good and ready. That is an actual quote from her. Comment 7. So never. If they can continue to leech off family members, all while presumably building a nice little nest egg, they have zero incentive to leave. I hope the kids don't grow up to be as entitled as the parents. Comnet 8. So even after you told her you wouldn't pick up the 6-year-old, they still expected you to? Looks like your husband's family are full of aholies. OP. She wasn't at school yesterday, so they had plenty of time to let her teacher know. But I guess it wasn't important to them. Comment 9. No, they just thought that you would feel bad about leaving her there. They did that intentionally, banking on you caving. I feel bad for the niece, but glad you didn't give in. Comment 10. It ended with my husband telling his parents that they had lost the privilege to talk to him for a week, and he would only unblock them when they give him and me a sincere apology. Hey, look at husband. Finally treating them like the spoiled children they've all been behaving like all along. Time out and everything. It sounds like he's finally opened his eyes and is playing for the right team. Comnet 11. I think it was so smart on OP to make him have to clean up their disgusting biohazard mess for a change. It's amazing how viewpoints change when you are all of a sudden directly affected. Comnet 12. Maybe it's my own fault for not reading comments, but 8 kids appearing in the last update just blindsided me. Surely you mention 8 kids as a reason for throwing the family out. Housing 8 kids is doing a lot to help even if they are perfect. Comment 13. Wonder if they were also making demands about bedrooms like their oldest daughter deserves her own room so oops children can go bunk with the other 7 kids. Comment 14. This screams missing. Missing reason like OP is a different race/religion. Also, I never understand that you have to take them in. Why don't they pitch in for an Airbnb for a set period of time? Comment 15. She said they're from the same race/religion, but the sister-in-law doesn't like her because she is older than her husband, sister-in-law's brother. Comment 16. I think OP also said in comments that sister-in-law is used to brother/OP's hubby being a pushover to her, so maybe that was the expectation. Comment 17. I hope her husband's spine continues to be shiny and strong. It sounds like he was the sibling who always kept the peace. Screw that. This post hit a nerve. I may not be a pushover, but my siblings have long treated my life events as less than. At first, I had all the time and resources because I was single. Next, I still had all the time and resources because I was married but not yet a parent. Reproducing has made them back off a little, just a bit. Similarly, all the other family members have a reason sister-in-law and her brood can't stay, and OP's reasons are the only invalid ones. Now on to the next story. Story 5. I found out my husband and his best friend had a secret relationship in high school that everyone knew except me. When I told him to distance himself from her, he keeps refusing. I feel like I'm going crazy, and I need a fresh perspective before taking the next step. I discovered that my husband, M37, and his best friend, F36, had a sexual relationship that lasted throughout high school years and multiple relationships. Apparently, it was a known secret in their circle of friends. Let me start from the beginning. I met my husband during the last year of college. He comes from a very small town and has the same group of friends since elementary school. I used to find it endearing. Now, I just stare at the walls when he mentions anything about his hometown. His best friend, F36, used to be his desk mate in kindergarten. He used to talk about her a lot before I met her, mostly fun anecdotes and childhood memories. It wasn't just casual mentions, either. At least once a day, he'd bring up pokey this or pokey that. He'd laugh about pranks they pulled on teachers or adventures they had in the woods behind their houses. When we were planning our wedding, he kept suggesting we should ask her opinion on venues because she knew the area so well. I'd catch him texting her during dinner, and he'd just shrug and say they were planning a surprise birthday for someone in their friend group. Honestly, I was a bit jealous at the beginning. He had all these memories and shared friends with her. He even had a special nickname for her, Pokey. No one else could call her that, just him. That should have been my first clue. I let go of my worries when I met her. Pokey wasn't like the horrible female best friend in the movies. She didn't roll her eyes when I spoke or make condescending comments about my clothes or job. She was always supportive and sweet. She'd remember things I mentioned months ago and ask follow-up questions. She'd bring homemade cookies when visiting and offer to help with dishes after dinner. She's a cake designer and she gifted us our wedding cake and made a beautiful speech. I remember standing there during the reception, watching her talk about how love changes people for the better, and feeling grateful that my husband had such thoughtful friends. Still, there was a part of me that always felt a bit uneasy. Me and my husband never really talked about past relationships, mostly because I didn't want to focus on the past. But, in general, from what he let slip, he was a bit of a player as a teenager. He'd make offhand comments about dating multiple girls at once or breaking up with someone via text message. His friends sometimes joked about how they were surprised he ever settled down. In particular, his friends sometimes talk about how it's incredible their group survived the summer of madness. I always assumed that some kind of high school drama happened and that was it, until I discovered what was about. Last Tuesday, I was out with one of my husband's friend's wife, Gertrude. We weren't even particularly close, but our husbands were hanging out and we decided to grab coffee. We were sitting at a small cafe downtown, just making small talk about work and upcoming holiday plans. Gertrude mentioned something about a group camping trip next month and asked if I was excited about spending 3 days in the woods with everyone. Gertrude told me something about how she admired me for being so secure in my marriage, even with the one that got away in the picture. I was confused. I set my coffee down and asked her what she meant. I told her that I didn't understand what she was talking about, and then she told me, "Oh, I thought you knew about Pokey and Maurice, my husband." I think I died a little hearing that. My hands went completely numb. The coffee shop suddenly seemed too loud. She proceeded to tell me about how they basically were together through high school years, how Pokey was my husband's first everything, and how they cheated on every single boyfriend/girlfriend they had during that period with the other. It wasn't just some teenage experimentation, either. Apparently, this went on for years. She told me how they'd sneak away from group outings to meet up, how they had a secret spot by the lake where they'd go when they were supposed to be studying, how everyone knew but nobody talked about it because they were all tired of the drama. Gertrude just kept talking, seemingly oblivious to how each word made my stomach twist tighter. The famous Summer of Madness was the last summer of high school. Apparently, the whole group was fighting because some were done with their behavior, while others kept covering for them. Some friends stopped speaking to each other. A few people stopped getting invited to parties because they called out Maurice and Pokey's behavior. Group camping trips got canceled. Birthdays went uncelebrated, all because my husband and his best friend couldn't keep their hands off each other, despite dating other people. What's worst is that it all ended because Pokey put a stop to it. She chose a college far away from their hometown and stopped talking to my husband for a whole year. Maurice went through 3 different girlfriends during that time. According to Gertrude, he would get drunk at parties and call Pokey's number, leaving long voicemails that their friends would have to delete before she heard them. She didn't come home for Christmas or spring break. She blocked him on social media. And then, suddenly, when his grandmother died, she showed up at the funeral, and they've been best friends ever since. After the revelation, I confronted Pokey. I shouldn't have, but I was so angry and humiliated. I waited outside her bakery after closing time. She saw me standing there and smiled, asking if I wanted to come in for leftover pastries. I followed her inside and started questioning her immediately. The smile dropped from her face as soon as I mentioned high school. She tried to interrupt me several times, but I kept going, asking how she could look me in the eye all these years knowing what she knew. I knocked over a chair when I stood up to leave. I don't want her near me or my husband. I keep thinking about how they shared everything, about how not even our intimacy is truly ours. It drives me insane. When I got home, I threw away the coffee mug she gifted me last Christmas. I deleted every photo with her from my phone. She obviously told my husband, and we've been fighting since then. He came home from work early the next day, slamming the front door and calling my name. He's telling me over and over that there's nothing between him and Pokey. In his opinion, I'm overreacting to something that happened almost 20 years ago and has been closed and dead. He keeps pointing at our wedding photos, at the 13 years we've spent together. He asks if I've ever seen any inappropriate behavior between them, but I feel like I can never trust the two of them together. Am I wrong? Additional information. Okay, so a lot of people are asking me why I got angry at Pokey and not my husband first. I am angry at Maurice. I can barely stand in the same room. I've been sleeping on the edge of the bed as far away from him as possible. I've been putting in extra hours at work just to avoid coming home. When he tries to touch me, I find myself flinching away. Last night he reached for my hand while we were watching TV and I pretended I needed to use the bathroom. Second, I feel childish, but I was/am jealous of her. I didn't grow up like Maurice. I barely remember the people I went to middle school with. My family moved 3 times before I finished high school. To me, friends are something different. They're people who come and go. People who are close for a season of life but eventually drift away when circumstances change. He had this girl that knew every single thing about him, that shared adventures and Christmases and birthdays, family and friends. She was there when he broke his arm falling out of a tree. She knows which teachers gave him a hard time. She remembers what his childhood bedroom looked like. It was a lot. I knew she was important to him, so I tried my best. I invited her to dinners at our place. I remembered her birthday. I asked her advice about gifts for Maurice. I made space for their friendship. I thought that at least I had his love first. Turns out, she had that too. When Gertrude told me, my mind immediately went to all those times I'd caught them whispering and laughing together. All those inside jokes I never understood. All those camping trips where they'd stay up late talking by the fire after everyone else went to bed. I was mad. Was it right? No, but in that moment she was the focus of my rage. No, and it drives me insane. Why can't he say that he was in love with her? It's plain. She was his first love. But no, I don't get it and I'm delusional. They were kids and confused. F that. What's confusing about ditching your friends and your GF for a summer in order to bang your best friend? What's confusing about destroying an entire friend group because you can't keep your hands to yourself? Even now, he refers to it as a stupid teenage thing and refuses to acknowledge the depth of what happened. Gertrude told me about the castle of lies he spun around that poor girl. How he told his girlfriend at the time that he was helping his dad with yard work while actually meeting Pokey at the lake. How he'd create elaborate excuses to miss family events if Pokey wasn't invited. I feel sick thinking about it. Update 1. Hi, guys. First of all, thank you for all the responses, the messages, and the support I got. Currently, I feel like I don't really have friends I can trust, but at least I can have some validation from you. I've spent the past week checking my phone constantly for notifications from this post. It's pathetic, but it's the only place where people actually understand what I'm going through. So, I have a small update and things don't look good. I had a pretty big fight with husband last night. He went to the usual Friday game night. I forgot to mention it in my last post, but he and his friends had two types of game nights. One is normally on Friday, as most of them don't work during the weekend. It's a group thing and they play some kind of D&D. Usually it's hosted by Andrew, M37, who is the master of the campaign. Then there are sporadic game nights in which some of them play video games and chat. In that case, the numbers of people are variable. Sometimes it's just Maurice and Andrew playing Call of Duty. Sometimes it's 5 or 6 of them playing Mario Kart and getting drunk. Pokey usually attends both types of game nights. As I said, last night Maurice went to play D&D. He was getting ready to leave, packing up his character sheets and dice. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom watching him. I asked if Pokey would be there. He sighed loudly and rolled his eyes before answering. He was annoyed and told me, yes. I asked if he had seen her these days. He told me that he went to get coffee with some of the guys on Tuesday and that Thursday he went to grab lunch. I was pissed, so I raised my voice and asked why he can't stay away from her at least for now. My hands were shaking. I grabbed onto the door frame to steady myself. He told me, and I quote, I can, but I'm not going to cater to your tantrum. I didn't do anything, so I'm not going to act like I'm guilty of something. He zipped up his backpack with more force than necessary and pushed past me into the hallway. I reiterated that I don't want her in our life now that I know, and he asked me, what do I want him to do? It's a small town and we are neighbors. All of my friends are her friends. Unless we move, we are going to have contacts. He was standing at the front door now, keys in hand, so I told him that maybe we should move. Maybe we should start over in a place where I can trust people. I suggested looking for jobs in the city, about an hour away. We could commute for a while before finding something closer to a new home. He told me I'm insane, that he's not going to sell his grandma's house that he loves and move somewhere away from his family and friends just because I feel insecure and to grow the F up. He slammed the door on his way out. I threw a coffee mug at the wall after he left. I spent 20 minutes cleaning up the broken pieces. I stormed into our room and he went to his friends. I tried watching TV but couldn't focus on anything. I tried reading but kept going over the same paragraph again and again. I tried calling my sister but she didn't pick up. When he came back around midnight, he started gaming on the PS instead of coming to bed. I could hear him talk, so I went to the living room. The lights were off except for the glow of the TV. He had his headset on and was completely focused on the screen. I asked him who he was playing with. I kid you not, he was playing COD and chatting with Pokey and Andrew. He was with her just a couple of hours before. I asked him to come to bed. I stood there in my pajamas, arms crossed, waiting for him to acknowledge me. He told me he had to finish the game and that he needed to vent frustration. I'm not proud of me, but I raised my voice again and said something like, "Can you even breathe without seeing her for 10 minutes?" He didn't even look at me. His eyes stayed fixed on the screen where he was shooting at someone. He just told me, "If you're going to make a scene, tell me now so I can turn off the mic." I walked out of the room, grabbing a blanket from the closet on my way. I slept in the guest room. The mattress was too hard and I woke up with a stiff neck this morning. Joachim, the friend that works in my office, came and talked to me. I was at my desk trying to focus on spreadsheets instead of my marriage falling apart. He knocked on my office door around 10 a.m. and closed it behind him. Apparently, Maurice has told them everything. Friday, he was venting. I imagined all of them sitting around the D&D table, rolling dice while my husband complained about his paranoid wife. Joachim told me that Gertrude thrives in drama, and that's why she opened the can of worms. He assured me that there's nothing between Pokey and Maurice and that this situation will become an issue, just if I make it one. His tone was condescending, like he was explaining something simple to a child. I asked him what he meant and he told me, "You married him, you know how he is. Maurice is like, emotionally dependent on Pokey or whatever. If she killed someone, he would dig a hole and help her hide the body. If you want this marriage to work, just learn to coexist." I asked him if he thinks Maurice still loves Pokey. He looked away, suddenly very interested in the family photo on my desk. He told me that Maybe I should ask my husband because he doesn't know. At this point, I just can't let this go. I feel like a crazy, paranoid woman, but I just can't let this go. The thought of them together keeps me up at night. I keep replaying every interaction I've ever seen between them, looking for signs I missed. I asked Gertrude out for lunch Wednesday. I sent her a text. I begged her to tell me everything she knows because I need to know. Still, I'm scared of what I'll learn. What if he never loved me at all? What if I was just a convenient replacement when Pokey rejected him? Update 2. Hello, guys. First of all, thank you for the messages and the chat. A lot of you sent me thanks for checking on me. I'm sorry I didn't reply and also for updating so late, but I needed time to think and sort myself. I've been staring at my phone screen for hours trying to find the right words. Some of you pointed out how I was spiraling and acting kind of crazy. You were right. I threw away all our wedding photos. I considered calling Pokey's ex-husband to ask if he had suspicions. 2. I checked Morris's phone while he was in the shower. I started keeping a log of every time he mentioned her name. It was hard to admit that I was doing as much damage as Maurice in the situation. And it was even harder to realize that maybe our marriage has more issues than what I thought. I'll start by saying that I never went to that lunch with Gertrude. I canceled 20 minutes before we were supposed to meet. Instead, I went to a park and sat on a bench for 2 hours, watching dogs play and children run around. After our fight that Friday night, my husband spent Saturday at his mother's house. She lives 30 minutes from us with her new husband. He stayed there the whole day, and I discovered from his story on IG that he took his 2 step-siblings to the laser game and then to dinner. He also took them to Pokey's bakery for dessert. I was livid but resigned at this point. He had clearly said that he didn't care for my discomfort, so it's not like I was expecting much. I ignored him when he came back later that evening. I just didn't want to fight again. I pretended to be asleep when he came into the bedroom. He came to me and told me that we should talk. When I didn't say anything, he told me that he was sorry for being an a-hole the day before, that he had started to sound like his father, and he hated it, and that the last thing he wanted was for our marriage to be like the one his parents had. I told him that he dismissed my feelings and that by still going to Pokey, he kept doing it and that I felt completely disrespected. I tried to explain as calmly as I could how hurt I was to know A, about their past by someone else, B, that everyone around me knew and never told me anything up until now. I explained that I felt like a stranger because our friends suddenly reminded me that they were as friends with their behavior and that I feel like I can't trust anyone around me because no one told me the truth. Then, I asked him point blank if he still loves Pokey and why he kept everything a secret. I held my breath waiting for his answer, and that's when he told me the truth, and oh boy, was I not ready. Maurice basically confessed that he had loved Pokey like crazy. Like let's elope even if we're 16 and stupid level of crazy. But his parents were divorcing during that time, and it was incredibly ugly and violent. So his teenager mind decided that love was dangerous, that by having relationships you lose the people you love. He then said that he decided to never have a relationship with someone important to you, in his case, Pokey. He admitted that it was stupid, but I was not exactly the smartest kid. He couldn't stay away, but he also couldn't bear to lose her if an eventual relationship would implode. So they stayed in this limbo until the summer of madness. Pokey was already pretty tired of the situation, but then she discovered that she was pregnant. It was Morris's because at the time she was single and a stupid teenager as they weren't using protection. I was already shocked as it was, but to hear my child-free husband say that he had wanted that baby the moment Pokey showed up in his room with a drugstore test left me speechless. So I asked what happened and he told me that 2 weeks after finding out she lost the baby. They were still trying to come up with a way to talk to their families in his room when it happened. She got appendicitis and somehow it got her tubes inflamed and caused her pregnancy loss. He told me that his worst memory is calling Pokey's mom and his mom from the hospital while hearing Pokey's cries from behind the door of her room. Maurice also told me that that was pretty much the moment he became child-free. He told me, "I never want to hear someone I love cry like that ever again." Also, because of that pregnancy loss, it has become impossible for Pokey to have children without planning and medical help. That's why her divorce was so brutal. Her ex-husband wanted kids and blamed her when they couldn't have them naturally. He said she wasn't trying hard enough. wasn't following the doctor's advice properly. Most of their friends don't know. They still think she just got appendicitis. They made up a story about a fight over college choices to explain why she cut contact with everyone that summer. Maurice told me that after what happened, she ran off to uni, avoiding him and pretty much the whole town for a year. He told me how confused and lonely he felt and how much he missed her. Not the girl he loved, but his best friend. The one who knew me better than myself and that I could always count on. So when she reached out when Morris's grandma died, he pretty much promised her that they'll never put themselves in a situation like that again, that they'll be just friends and nothing more, and that's what they have been. He told me that he'll always love her, but that whatever they had is done, and he married me and loves me, and that's what should matter. While saying this, he reached for my hand, but I pulled away. When I asked him if he was willing to see Pokey less and have a different kind of friendship for my sake, he told me that while he loves me, he values his friends enough to not cut them off. He told me that after 13 years together, I should know this about him. His voice grew louder with each word, so I told him that after 13 years, I should matter enough. I packed a bag and told them I was going to visit my parents because I needed time. I threw clothes into a suitcase without checking if they matched. I grabbed my toothbrush and charger, leaving everything else behind, and that's where we are. I took some time from work and I'm still at my parents'. My mother keeps asking questions I don't want to answer. My father keeps suggesting I call a lawyer. It was a lot and I still don't know how to feel. I'm mostly empty. I've been walking around my parents' neighborhood for hours each day. I've been helping my mother with gardening even though I hate it. I've been avoiding Morris's calls. Now on to the next story. Story 6. My ex-Mil claimed that my baby was her grandchild. Then, my partner's mom demanded a paternity test to prove that it is her son's. So we cut contact. And now she's spreading lies about us. Okay, Reddit, I genuinely need some advice. I'm 29F and my partner, Mark, 30M. And I just had our daughter, Lily, 2 weeks ago. Lily is amazing, healthy, and the absolute light of our lives. Getting here, however, has been a saga worthy of a daytime soap opera. And it all boils down to two incredibly difficult mothers. My ex-mother-in-law and Mark's mom. To understand the current mess, I need to give you some backstory. I was married before very briefly. I met my ex-husband, let's call him David, 31M, when I was 22. We were young, impulsive, and thought we were madly in love. We got married after dating for about 8 months. It was a disaster almost from the start. We were just fundamentally incompatible. We argued constantly about everything, from how to load the dishwasher, seriously, to our long-term goals. He wanted to stay in our small hometown forever, buy a house with a white picket fence, and start popping out kids immediately. I wanted to focus on my career and maybe think about kids in my late 20s. We were married for a little over a year before we both realized it was a mistake. There was no big dramatic blow-up, no infidelity, just a slow, agonizing realization that we were making each other miserable. We decided to get divorced. It was surprisingly amicable. We didn't hate each other. We just recognized we were better off apart. We didn't have any shared assets or kids, so the legal process was relatively straightforward. My parents were supportive. They'd never been huge fans of David. They thought he was a bit boring, to be honest, and they just wanted me to be happy. David's mom, though, she was a different story. Let's call her Susan. She's the type of woman who has her entire life planned out, and she expects everyone around her to follow that plan whether they like it or not. She's also deeply religious and believes that divorce is a sin, no matter the circumstances. Susan had this vision of David and me as the perfect traditional couple. She was devastated when we split up. She tried everything to get us to work things out, including guilt trips, tearful phone calls, and even showing up at my apartment unannounced with a marriage counselor in tow. It was incredibly awkward and uncomfortable. I tried to be polite and respectful, but I also had to be firm. I told her that I appreciated her concern, but the decision was final. The divorce was finalized about 7 years ago. I moved to a different city, got a great job, and basically started a whole new life. I cut off contact with David and Susan. It wasn't out of malice. It was just necessary for me to move on. We weren't friends on social media, and we didn't have any mutual friends, so it was a clean break. Then, about a year and a half ago, I met Mark. We met at a work conference. We started chatting during a coffee break, and we just clicked. He was funny, smart, kind, and shared my passion for travel and adventure. We exchanged numbers, and we started dating soon after. Mark knew about my previous marriage from the very beginning. It wasn't a secret. I told him the whole story on our second date, and he was completely unfazed. He said it was in the past and it didn't change how he felt about me. He'd had a few long-term relationships himself, so he understood that not everything works out. We fell in love quickly. It was different from my relationship with David. With Mark, it felt easy, natural, and exciting. We had so much in common and just generally enjoyed each other's company. About 6 months into our relationship, I met Mark's parents. His dad, John, is the sweetest, most laid-back guy you'll ever meet. He welcomed me with open arms and made me feel like part of the family immediately. Mark's mom, Carol, however, was a different story. Carol is complicated. She's very polished, very proper, and very, very opinionated. She's also incredibly attached to Mark, who is her only child. From the moment I met her, I could sense that she was sizing me up and finding me lacking. She was polite, but there was a definite chill in the air. She made a few subtle digs about my divorce, nothing outright rude, but little comments like, "Oh, you've been married before? That's interesting," or "I always believe that marriage is forever, no matter what." She also made it clear that she expected Mark to settle down and have a traditional family, just like Susan had wanted for David. I tried to brush it off. I figured she was just protective of her son, and I hoped that she would warm up to me eventually. But she never really did. She was always polite but never genuinely friendly. She'd ask me questions about my job and my family, but it always felt like an interrogation, not a conversation. Then, about 8 months ago, I found out I was pregnant. It was a surprise, but a happy one. Mark and I had talked about kids in the future, but we weren't actively trying. We were both thrilled, though. We decided not to get married right away. I'd been through one rushed wedding, and I didn't want to repeat that experience. I wanted to make sure that we were getting married for the right reasons, not just because we were having a baby. Mark completely understood and supported my decision. We told our families. My parents were ecstatic. They've always wanted grandchildren. John was equally thrilled. He started talking about building a treehouse and teaching the baby how to fish. Carol, predictably, was not happy. She didn't say anything outright negative, but her disapproval was clear. She kept saying things like, "Well, I suppose it's not the traditional way to do things," and "I just hope you're both prepared for the challenges of parenthood." She also started hinting very strongly that we should get married before the baby arrived. The pregnancy itself was relatively smooth. I had some morning sickness in the first trimester, but overall I felt good. Mark was incredibly supportive. He went to all my doctor's appointments, read all the baby books, and even started learning how to cook, which was a minor miracle. Throughout the pregnancy, Carol continued to be a source of stress. She'd call me regularly, ostensibly to check on me, but the calls always ended up feeling like lectures. She'd tell me what I should be eating, how much I should be exercising, and what kind of parenting books I should be reading. She even sent me a list of approved baby names, all of which were incredibly old-fashioned and stuffy. I tried to be patient and understanding. I knew she was just trying to be helpful in her own way, but it was exhausting. I felt like I was constantly being judged and criticized. Then, about a month before my due date, something completely unexpected happened. I got a text message from a number I didn't recognize. It said, "Is this OP? It's Susan, David's mom. We need to talk. It's about the baby." My heart dropped. I hadn't spoken to Susan in years. Why was she contacting me now? And what did she mean? "It's about the baby?" I showed the text to Mark. He was just as confused as I was. We decided that I should call her back and find out what was going on. I called Susan, and she answered immediately. She sounded frantic. She said, "I know this is going to sound crazy, but I think the baby you're carrying is David's. I was speechless. I literally couldn't comprehend what she was saying. What, Susan? That's impossible. I haven't seen David in years. She explained that she'd seen a picture of me on social media. Apparently, one of my distant relatives had tagged me in a photo, and I was clearly pregnant. She'd done some research, which I'm pretty sure means stalking my online profiles, and had concluded that the timing could work out. She was convinced that I'd secretly gotten back together with David and that this baby was his. I tried to explain to her as calmly as I could that she was completely wrong. I told her about Mark, about how long we'd been together, but she wouldn't listen. She kept insisting that I was lying and that I needed to come clean for the sake of the baby. The conversation ended with her threatening to show up at the hospital when I went into labor. I hung up the phone feeling completely shaken and bewildered. I told Mark everything. He was furious. He couldn't believe that Susan would accuse me of something so outrageous. He wanted to call her himself and give her a piece of his mind, but I convinced him not to. I didn't want to escalate the situation. We decided to ignore Susan and hope that she would come to her senses. We figured she was just grasping at straws, desperate for her son to have a child. Then, 2 weeks ago, I went into labor. It was a long and difficult labor, but eventually, our beautiful daughter, Lily, was born. Mark was with me the entire time, and he was amazing. We were in the recovery room, exhausted but euphoric, when there was a commotion outside the door. Suddenly, Susan burst into the room, followed by a very bewildered-looking security guard. She started yelling, "That's my grandchild. I know it. You need to tell the truth. You've been lying to everyone." It was a complete nightmare. I was still recovering from childbirth. I was hormonal, and I was utterly humiliated. Mark stepped in and told Susan to leave, but she refused. It took 2 security guards to physically remove her from the room. The whole incident was incredibly upsetting. I was furious with Susan. After we got home from the hospital, I decided to call David. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but I felt like I needed to clear the air and make sure he knew what his mother had done. He answered the phone, sounding surprised to hear from me. I explained the situation and he was horrified. He apologized profusely for his mother's behavior. He explained that he'd been dating someone new, a woman named Serene. Serene and I share a similar first name, although not exactly the same. It's like, imagine my name is Serena and hers is Serene. Close, but different. David had been keeping Serene a secret from his mom, Susan. He knew how obsessed Susan was with him getting remarried and having kids, and he didn't want to deal with her pressure. Apparently, about a month ago, Susan had overheard David talking to Serene on the phone. She'd misheard the name, thinking he'd said my name. She'd immediately jumped to the conclusion that David and I had gotten back together. David, being a bit of a coward, his words, not mine, hadn't corrected her. He figured it was easier to let her believe what she wanted than to deal with her reaction to his new relationship. He told her that I wanted to keep things quiet, which is why she hadn't heard from me. Then, on the day I went into labor, Susan's sister happened to be at the same hospital for a routine appointment. She had only met me a couple of times years ago, but she knew Susan's obsession with me and David. When she saw me, hugely pregnant, being rushed to labor and delivery, she immediately called Susan. That's how Susan ended up in my hospital room, convinced I was carrying her grandchild. David apologized profusely. He said he was an idiot, that he should have told his mom the truth a long time ago. He also told me that he tried to talk to his mother, but she refused to believe him. She was convinced that he was just covering for me. He said he and Serene were moving to another state to be closer to Serene, and that I wouldn't have to worry about her anymore. I told him I appreciated the apology, but that what he and his mother had done was incredibly damaging. I told him I never wanted to speak to him or Susan again. Mark was listening to the whole conversation. He was furious. He said he couldn't believe how selfish and irresponsible David and Susan had been. It confirmed that I wasn't crazy, but it didn't solve the bigger problem, Carol. Mark had told his parents about the incident at the hospital, of course. John was appalled. He couldn't believe that Susan would do something so outrageous. Carol, however, was surprisingly quiet. She didn't defend Susan, but she didn't condemn her either. She just said, "Well, It's certainly a complicated situation. Then, a few days later, Carol came to visit us. She brought a gift for Lily, a very expensive baby blanket that was totally not my style. She held Lily for a few minutes, cooing over her, but then she got down to business. She said, "Mark, I've been thinking a lot about this whole situation, and I think for everyone's peace of mind, it would be best if you got a paternity test." I was stunned. I couldn't believe she was actually suggesting that. Mark looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of anger and apology. He said, "Mom, I'm not doing that. I trust OP completely. This is ridiculous." Carol didn't back down. She said, "It's not about trust, Mark. It's about being responsible. You need to know for sure. What if Susan is right? What if this baby is David's?" I finally spoke up. I said, "Carol, I can assure you this baby is Mark's. I haven't been with anyone else since we met. This is insulting." She looked at me with a cold, hard stare. "I'm just trying to protect my son," she said. "I'm sure you understand." The conversation went downhill from there. It ended with Mark telling his mother that he wouldn't even consider a paternity test and that if she couldn't trust him and respect his relationship with me, then she wasn't welcome in our lives. She left in a huff, and we haven't spoken to her since. Mark has tried calling her a few times, but she hasn't answered. John has called Mark, and he's very upset about the whole situation. He's caught in the middle, and he doesn't know what to do. So Reddit, here I am. I'm a new mom trying to navigate the challenges of motherhood, and I'm also dealing with this insane family drama. I'm hurt and angry that Carol would question my integrity and Mark's paternity. I'm also worried about the long-term impact this will have on Mark's relationship with his mother. I told Carol that if she wanted to keep pushing the DNA test issue, she could kick rocks. I didn't use those exact words, of course. I was more polite, but the message was clear. I told her that if she couldn't accept that Lily was Mark's daughter without proof, then she didn't need to be a part of our lives. I do want Mark to have a relationship with his mother, but I also refuse to be treated with such disrespect, and I definitely don't want my daughter to grow up around someone who doubts her parentage. Any advice or suggestions will be considered. Update 1. Wow! I didn't expect this post to blow up like this. Thank you to everyone for your support and advice. It's been incredibly validating to hear that I'm not crazy and that Carol's behavior is completely out of line. A lot of you suggested that I talk to Mark about setting some clear boundaries with his mother, and you're absolutely right. I had been avoiding the conversation because I was exhausted and didn't want to deal with more drama, but it needed to happen. So, last night, after Lily was asleep, Mark and I had a long talk. I told him how hurt and disrespected I felt by Carol's demand for a paternity test. I also told him that I was worried about the impact this was having on his relationship with his father, John. Mark completely understood. He said that he was furious with his mother, not just for the paternity test demand but for her overall behavior throughout my pregnancy. He said that he'd been making excuses for her for years, but he was finally seeing her for who she really is. A controlling, manipulative woman who cares more about her own image than her son's happiness. He told me that he tried calling her again, but she still wasn't answering. He left her a voicemail telling her that he was disappointed in her and that he wouldn't be contacting her again until she apologized to me and accepted Lily as his daughter. No questions asked. He also said that he'd spoken to John again. John is heartbroken by the situation. He loves Carol, but he also recognizes that she's in the wrong. He told Mark that he's considering staying with us for a while just to get some space from Carol and to spend time with Lily. Mark and I agreed that we would welcome John with open arms. We have a spare bedroom, and Lily adores him. It would be great to have his help, and it would also give him a break from the toxic environment at home. A few of you asked about my parents and why they weren't more involved. That's a fair question, and I should have explained that in the original post. My parents live quite far away on the other side of the country, actually. They're also both in their late 50s and not in the best of health. Traveling long distances is very difficult for them, especially with all the restrictions and concerns these days. We talk to them on video calls almost every day, and they adore Lily, even from afar. They're incredibly supportive of me and Mark, and they were furious when I told them about Susan's outburst at the hospital and Carol's subsequent behavior. They wish they could be here to help, but they just physically can't. They send their love and support, and that means the world to me. They also said if John needed a place to crash, they would happily chip in with some cash and asked me to find him a good retirement home. It was really sweet of them. So, that's where things stand right now. Carol is still giving us the silent treatment. John is thinking about moving in with us, and Mark and I are trying to focus on being parents to our amazing little girl. I'm no longer trying to appease Carol or tiptoe around her feelings. I'm putting my family first, and that's what matters most. I'll keep you updated on any further developments. Thanks again for all your support. Update 2. Well, things have escalated. John came to stay with us a few days ago. He brought a small suitcase and a very sad expression. He told us that Carol had barely spoken to him since Mark's last phone call. She'd been cold and distant, and he just couldn't take it anymore. He spent the first day mostly just cuddling Lily and talking to Mark. He seemed incredibly relieved to be away from the tension and negativity. He kept saying how much he loved Lily and how grateful he was to be able to spend time with her. Then, yesterday, Carol showed up at our door unannounced, of course. I was in the nursery, feeding Lily, when I heard the doorbell ring. Mark answered it, and I could hear Carol's voice, loud and shrill. I came out to the living room, and the scene was tense. Carol was standing in the doorway looking furious. John was sitting on the couch looking defeated. Mark was standing between them, his arms crossed. Carol demanded that John come home immediately. She said that he was being ridiculous, that he was embarrassing her. She accused me of manipulating him and turning him against her. John tried to speak, but Carol wouldn't let him get a word in edgewise. She just kept ranting and raving, accusing me of all sorts of things. Finally, Mark had enough. He told Carol in no uncertain terms that she needed to leave. He said that she was not welcome in our home until she apologized to me and accepted Lily without reservation. Carol looked shocked. She clearly wasn't used to Mark standing up to her. She sputtered for a moment, then turned on her heel and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The whole thing was incredibly stressful. I felt awful for John. He looked so lost and confused. He apologized to me repeatedly, even though he hadn't done anything wrong. Mark and I reassured him that he was welcome to stay with us for as long as he needed. We told him that we loved him and that we were happy to have him. After John went to bed, Mark and I talked. We both agreed that Carol's behavior was completely unacceptable. We decided that we needed to set some even firmer boundaries. Mark sent Carol a text message telling her that we were going no contact until she sought professional help for her controlling behavior and apologized to both me and John. He said that we loved her, but we couldn't allow her to continue to disrespect us and disrupt our lives. It's been a couple of days, and we haven't heard from her. I'm not sure what to expect. Update 3. It's been about a week since Carol's dramatic visit. We haven't heard a peep from her. No calls, no texts, no angry emails, nothing. John, on the other hand, has settled in nicely. He's a huge help with Lily, and he's clearly enjoying spending time with her. He reads to her, sings to her, and takes her for walks in the stroller. It's heartwarming to see. He's also started talking more openly about his marriage. He confided in Mark and me that he's been unhappy for years. He said that Carol has always been controlling, but it's gotten worse over time. He feels like he's lost himself in the relationship and that he's just been going through the motions. He started seeing a therapist, which Mark and I encouraged. He says it's helping him to process his feelings and to figure out what he wants for the future. He's not sure if he wants to stay married to Carol, even if she does apologize. He says he needs to think about what's best for him for once. Mark is fully supportive of his dad, whatever he decides. He's just glad that John is finally standing up for himself. As for me, I'm trying to focus on Lily and on creating a peaceful, loving home for our family. I'm still hurt and angry about Carol's behavior, but I'm trying not to let it consume me. I've started thinking about going back to work part-time. My maternity leave is almost over, and I'm missing my skills. Mark is completely on board, and John has offered to help with childcare. We're also starting to plan Lily's first birthday party. It's going to be a small, intimate gathering, just close family and friends. Obviously, Carol won't be invited. It's strange to think about celebrating a major milestone without Mark's mother present, but I honestly don't see any other option. She's made her choice, and she has to live with the consequences. I'm still hoping that someday she'll come to her senses and apologize, but I'm not holding my breath. Update 4. A few small but significant things have happened. First, John filed for legal separation from Carol. He met with a lawyer and decided that it was the best course of action, at least for now. He said he needed to create some formal distance between them. He told Carol about his decision, and she, predictably, did not take it well. She called Mark, screaming and crying, accusing him of turning his father against her. Mark remained calm and told her that John had made his own decision and that she needed to respect it. Then, a few days later, we received a letter from Carol's lawyer. It was a cease and desist letter, demanding that we stop spreading false and defamatory information about her. Apparently, she's claiming that we've been telling people that she's mentally unstable and that she's a bad grandmother. It's completely ridiculous, of course. We haven't been talking about her to anyone except for John's therapist, which is confidential. We're pretty sure she's just trying to intimidate us and scare us into backing down. Mark consulted with his own lawyer, who advised us to ignore the letter. He said it was baseless and that Carol had no legal grounds to stand on. So, that's where we are. John is legally separated from Carol, and we're dealing with a frivolous legal threat. It's all very stressful, but we're trying to stay strong and united. On a more positive note, Lily is thriving. She's growing and developing so quickly. She started babbling and smiling constantly. She's the most amazing little person, and she brings so much joy into our lives. Now on to the next story. Story 7. Dad refused to walk me down the aisle because he wanted to walk my sister first, but she chose our stepdad instead. Now Dad's crying and begging me to allow him to do it. I've never really been a vindictive woman, but I just love it when karma is served piping hot on a platter. And that is what has happened. I could not be happier or more smug about the entire situation, and I don't care if that makes me a bad person or a bad daughter. I am just so happy that I have finally been able to see justice after years and years of trauma and emotional neglect. I have grown up feeling horrible because of my father, and now that he has no one else to fall back to, he suddenly remembers this daughter of his that he never really liked in the first place. I, F31, am the middle of 3 siblings. I have an elder brother, Finn, M37, and a younger sister, Sarah, F29. For most of my childhood, we were a happy family. My parents had their favorites, but at least my mom, F59, tried her best to be an equal parent. The same cannot be said for my father, M65. He made favoritism blatantly obvious. Sarah was the apple of his eye, and he had a natural affinity for Finn because he was the son and they could bond over man things. So naturally, I was excluded from this dynamic. It started very young. I always remember feeling that Dad didn't really like me. I tried to voice it a few times, I guess through tantrums. I was a difficult child in general, but nothing I ever did made him pay much attention to me. So as I grew up, I accepted it. I think Mom saw through his favoritism and tried to compensate. I have always loved her for seeing me, in a sense, because if it had been for my father, I would have stayed invisible all my life. Like I said, Mom wasn't still as the equal parent. She loved us equally and treated us the same. She tried her best to not make me feel left out, and I think Finn saw it, too. He saw my neglect. He saw that I was kind of always aloof, and he tried to fill in. He used to ask Dad to let me come when Dad taught him how to change car tires. He made sure I was there when Dad taught him how to drive a car. I know it was him because Dad never included me in the conversations. I wasn't abused or something like that. Like if they got us gifts, we were given similar things. I got as many new dresses as Sarah or Finn. I was just never taken care of emotionally by Dad. And all that time Mom and Finn tried to fill that hole in my life. On the other hand, Sarah just loved being a little princess. She was a snobby young kid and her school raised several alarms over her attitude. But somehow all those concerns were brushed under the carpet. She grew up to be quite an exhausting and entitled young woman, and as such, I am not very close to her. Finn and I are very thick, and Finn just cannot stand Sarah. The only person who does not see a problem with her behavior is Dad, and Mom also just about tolerates her. This is how things are as of now. Around 10 years ago, Mom and Dad got divorced. The split was amicable, and all of us have been kept in the dark about what the actual reason was. Mom and Dad just say that they weren't compatible anymore, but all of us know that that's a lie and the real reason is something else. I am almost certain that it wasn't infidelity because neither of them started dating anyone new for a long time after the divorce. But to this day, none of us know what really happened, and Mom and Dad have always preferred to keep it this way. We were all adults when this happened, so there was no custody drama to deal with, and they have mostly been on good terms since then. I have personally preferred not to visit Dad all that much because, let's be honest, there is no love lost there. He hasn't complained about my absence, so I guess it suits both of us. I generally go to Mom's place when I have the time, but Finn and Sarah divide their time equally between the two places. Finn and I sometimes coordinate when we go to Mom's place, but we never go with Sarah unless it's for Christmas. Finn genuinely just cannot stand her. All in all, we seem pretty functional and normal to anyone who looks at us from the outside. Things, however, have changed for the worse, and I for once am happy about it. 5 years ago, Mom started dating Arthur, M60. They met at a yoga retreat and hit it off instantly. He's a cool guy and I like spending time with him. He is good to Finn and me and never tries to push boundaries. I don't think there is any reason for him to be bad to Sarah, and no one has ever said anything about it, so I assume that things are okay between them as well. Mom is happy and that's all that matters. He is cordial with Dad as well, even though Dad is the one who gives him a lot of attitude. I think it's because Dad's dating life has not been very successful and he doesn't have a stable partner. Moreover, Arthur earns much more than Dad, and Mom's life is luxurious as of today when compared to what she had when she was with Dad. All of us are happy for Mom, but I think Dad just feels quite bitter about the entire situation. He also doesn't like the fact that we have a good relationship with Arthur, even though Finn has tried to explain to Dad that none of us are replacing him but are just being sensible adults about the entire situation. He still acts jealous. It's all quite childish and extremely off-putting. I thankfully don't have to deal with much of it because I don't interact with Dad that much. This is how the current dynamics of the family are. The background is important for what has happened in the last couple of days. A few months ago, my fiancé, Kieran, M34, proposed to me. We have been together for a long while now. I didn't announce the engagement immediately because I quite enjoy my privacy. Both Kieran and I wanted to keep the engagement period short and get married as soon as possible, so we let our families know after we had decided on the date. The wedding is scheduled a week from now. When I told my family, the reaction was mixed. Finn and Mom were overjoyed, and Arthur was happy, too. Dad had a very normal reaction, but Sarah seemed quite upset. It all happened over a video call, and I could see that she just forced a smile and disconnected the call soon after. I was expecting some kind of a tantrum from her because she hates not being the center of attention, but I couldn't be bothered with her drama at that point in time. I called Finn separately to gossip and also told him that I wanted him and not Dad to walk me down the aisle. He was quiet for a while and he said that while he was very touched by my request, he felt it was inappropriate to do it and that Dad would create a huge fuss about it. He said that he would absolutely love to do it, but he couldn't because he didn't want to upset Dad. I was hurt by what he said. I told him that I had come to him because I had been failed by Dad repeatedly and he knew that. I wanted him to be the one standing there with me because he has been my male protective figure much more than Dad. It was an emotional conversation and I hate to admit it, but I also thought that he was making sense, so I didn't fight him on it. He gently told me that whether or not he walked me down the aisle was not important. What was important was that I have a day that has the least possible drama so that I can think back on it happily and not have any bad feelings on that day. He said that if he did end up taking Dad's role, Dad would stay pissy during the entire ceremony and just ruin the day and the memories for me. He was right. Dad was quite capable of pulling off this stunt, and I know what Finn said was ultimately going to make the day easier for me, if not ideal. He told me to talk to Dad about it, and I said that I was quite reluctant about having him walk me down the aisle and that I would think about it. Thankfully for me, 2 weeks later, Sarah too announced her engagement with her boyfriend, Zach. Kieran and I exchanged looks, and I knew that she would now try to upstage my wedding or pull off some other stunt. But I couldn't really help it. Finn wasn't that happy either. Both of us understood why the timing was such, but well, we couldn't control it, so we had to stay quiet. One good thing that came out of this was that Sarah's wedding date is a month after mine, so around 5 weeks from now. She had really wanted to somehow manage to get married before me, but the stars never aligned in her favor and she had to make do with being the second bride of the family. She was quite salty about it and tried to guilt me into postponing my wedding, but I stayed firm. I was not one to pander to her whims, and that was something that she needed to outgrow. So things stayed as they were. However, apparently Dad and her had a pact that he would walk her down the aisle first before walking me down the aisle. I really don't know how they came up with something as twisted as that. I guess they assumed that I wouldn't be getting married or would get married late because I never had much luck with boys in school and college anyway. So when I asked Dad to walk me down the aisle, this was after Sarah had announced her engagement. He regretfully said that he had promised his baby that he would walk her down the aisle first, and he had made that promise years ago when she was on her deathbed. This never happened, and now he couldn't go back on his words and break her heart. So he wouldn't be able to walk me down the aisle. I won't lie, I was ecstatic because I didn't want him walking me down the aisle anyway. I pretended to be so sad and hurt, but I was dancing internally. I told him that I respected his promise to Sarah, and while it hurt me a lot, it didn't. I would accept it. I immediately called Finn up and told him what had happened, and he was furious at Dad. He told me that if he had known Dad would behave like this, he would have jumped at the first moment of me asking him to walk me down the aisle. He said that if Dad could choose which daughter to give this privilege to, so could I. He was mad at Dad, but I was too happy to even care. It had ultimately become exactly what I had wanted, and I could not be happier. Things were going well despite all the stress of planning a wedding. I'd been jittery and nervous, but things seemed well in place till yesterday when unprecedented drama made its way into my life, for which I have no stamina. In short, last evening Sarah informed Dad that he wouldn't be walking her down the aisle. She asked Arthur to be the one to do it. It came as a surprise to all of us. She did it over a video call, no less. It was brutal, and she could have been more sensitive about it. All of us knew that Dad was looking forward to her wedding. He even paid for all of it because her fiancé and her want to save the money for the honeymoon. Mom and Dad had a lot on their plate with helping plan for 2 weddings, and Dad had almost mentally checked out of mine. He had no input or suggestions to give, and he would just stay disinterested in anything related to my wedding because all his focus was on Sarah. Moreover, he hadn't contributed a dime towards my wedding. Kieran and I are funding it ourselves. It had become so bad that I was relying more on Mom and Arthur's approval for suggestions more than Dad's. Arthur was actually involved in my wedding, which was not the case with Sarah. This is exactly why even Arthur looked taken aback by Sarah's request, or rather, demand, and didn't know how to respond. He kept on looking at Mom. We were all at a loss of words, and Mom said that Arthur would love to do it. It had to be one of the worst calls I've ever attended, and I work in corporate, so bad calls are kind of my staple. I think Dad was in tears. Instead of talking to Sarah about it, he started cussing out Arthur and disconnected the call. And that was that. I am sure the others must have asked him how he was feeling, but I didn't. I had many other things to worry about, so I promptly exited the call. Plus, this wasn't my issue anyway. It was a promise between Sarah and him, one that he did not want to break. And if she did, that was between them. I had no intention or desire of wanting to intervene. They could sort this out amongst themselves. I had no role to play in this, and this was not the time to involve me in petty family issues that did not concern me. Little did I know that it would end up concerning me soon enough. To my utter annoyance, Dad called me last night in tears. This was a few hours after the devastating blow his little princess had inflicted on him. He was sobbing on the phone, telling me that he was a fool for rejecting my offer of letting him walk me down the aisle and that he would love to do it for me. I couldn't believe my ears. The entitlement was shocking. I told him very gently that while I felt very bad for what had happened, it was something between Sarah and him, and it in no way changed what I had planned for my wedding. I told him that Finn was walking me down the aisle and that had been decided months ago, and that I could not change it at the last minute. He said that he would talk to Finn and that Finn was a placeholder for him anyway and that I didn't have to worry about Finn not agreeing. I told him that it wasn't about Finn not agreeing. I didn't want to hurt Finn. I also didn't want him to walk me down the aisle in the first place, but he did not need to know that. He insisted that he would talk to Finn and set things straight like they should be, but I told him that a swap was not happening. Finn would be walking me down the aisle and that was final. He was in complete denial. He thought I was resisting because Finn wouldn't step down and he was confident that he could talk him out of it. I disconnected the call and called Finn right after I spoke to Dad and told him what was up. To say that Finn was livid would be an understatement. He asked me what I wanted, and I told him that I had always wanted him to be the one to give me away. He was the first person I had asked, and it was only at his insistence that I had asked Dad in the first place. He asked me if I was sure I wanted him to walk me down the aisle, and I said yes. He then told me that I needn't worry about anything and that he would set Dad straight for me if Dad did call him. I told him that I didn't want any drama at the wedding and that Dad needed to be informed. He couldn't just breeze in whenever he likes and use me as a replacement daughter just because his favorite kicked him to the boot. Finn told me not to worry about it and that he would see to it that Dad knows that there is no change in the wedding plans. This was last night and I have had no communication with either of them since then and it is driving me sick. Everything was going well, and I really don't have it in me to deal with this drama right now. I don't know if I should talk to them and I don't know what has happened between Finn and Dad and if he has spoken to him at all. I am nauseous with anxiety and I don't know what to do. Update 1. I finally spoke to Finn and things are a mess. They're even worse than I thought. But thankfully he has most of it handled so it's not going to come and create problems for me. Finn said that he was waiting for Dad to call him up and talk to him about the supposed change in plans. But the call never came. That was when he realized that Dad wasn't even going to discuss any of this and that just because he had decided he would be walking me down the aisle automatically meant that everyone had to be okay with it. Finn waited for a day for Dad to reach out. But when he didn't, he called him up himself. He asked Dad if there was a change of plans because I had been saying something. Dad tried to act all nonchalant and said that I had asked him to walk me down the aisle since Sarah won't be doing that anymore. Now the thing with Finn is that he is very diplomatic. He is the sensible and level-headed one amongst the three of us. So when he told me that he went full-on ballistic on Dad, I was very surprised. Finn said that he asked Dad to cut the crap and that both of them knew that I hadn't asked him to walk me down the aisle, but rather he was the one who had begged to have the role of the father in my wedding because his favorite daughter had kicked him out. When Dad heard this, he was obviously furious. He has that typical habit of reacting viciously when confronted with the truth or anything that he does not want to hear. But before he could cut in and say anything, Finn told him to shut the hell up for once and listen to what others had to say. He said that Dad should be grateful that he was even getting an invite to my wedding, given the way that he had treated me all these years. And then Finn tore a new one into him. He apologized to me and said that he knew it wasn't his place to lash out at Dad like this, especially a few days before my wedding, but he said he couldn't control himself and he wanted Dad to know what he really was and come out of the facade that he was living in. He said everything. He said that he had always favored Sarah the most and would at least try and make an effort with Finn, but that I was always an afterthought for him, and I knew that. He also said that I had actually asked Finn to walk me down the aisle and he was the first option for me anyway, but it was his insistence that had made me talk to Dad in the first place. Finn said that he had hoped Dad would take up the offer and then at least start to mend the relationship that I had with him, but he blew his chance. Finn said that he was a failure of a dad because out of his 3 kids, none of them loved or respected him. He didn't respect Dad because Dad couldn't be a fair parent to all his children. I didn't respect him because he never bothered to love me and treat me like his daughter. And funnily enough, even Sarah didn't respect him because if she did, she wouldn't have pulled the stunt that she did. He said that Sarah growing up to be an entitled brat was all on Dad because he was the one who had pampered her and raised her all these years. He said that Sarah's personality, and a horrible one at that, was Dad's creation and that it served him right that he was discarded by his favorite child because he had been discarding his children since they had been born. Finn said that there was quite a lot more that he had said, but he didn't remember most of it since it was said in blinding rage. He assured me that after the stern reality check that Dad had gotten, I didn't have to worry about him pulling any stunts, and if he did, Finn would set him straight right there. He also said that there was absolutely no change in plans, that he would be the one walking me down the aisle and that he would not change it for the world. He apologized for the ruckus that ensued right before the wedding, but I was more thankful than anything else. In all my life, I have never had the strength to take this kind of a stand for myself, and I had assumed that this was how my life was supposed to be. I always thought that maybe Dad didn't love me because of some fault of mine. I tried to outgrow that feeling over the years, but I never could, and here I had my brother taking a fierce stand for me, something that I had never expected anyone to do. My mother should have when we were kids, but she didn't. She tried to make up for the lack of affection in her own way, but she never stood up for me. I don't blame her for it, but it was her diffidence and deference towards Dad that made me feel that maybe there would never be a situation where I could tell him how horrible he was being to me. But that had changed, and it had changed only because my brother loved me so much that he couldn't bear the thought of me going through this anymore. I had tears in my eyes by the time he had narrated the entire incident, and I was choking when I told him that this was the most beautiful thing that anyone had ever done for me. I don't think Finn realizes the magnitude of what he has done, but it has to be the best thing that I could ever ask for. Update 2. I am now a married woman. I actually got married a few days ago and am currently enjoying my honeymoon with Kieran in Thailand. The wedding went without a hitch, though there was still some drama before it. With Finn not backing down and Dad not being able to walk even one daughter down the aisle, things had gotten quite serious. The main thing Dad was concerned with was, how would the extended family view him if he was missing from both the kids' weddings? This was the point he kept circling back to. When Finn and he had a chat again, Finn told him point blank that at least for my wedding he was missing the role of the father because he was emotionally checked out with me anyway. And Finn said that he should be grateful that he was even getting an invite in the first place. And as for Sarah, nobody really knows why she did what she did, and he could only ask himself what went wrong with her since she was his favorite. Word got around to Sarah, and she had the audacity to call me and say that I needed to have Dad walk me down the aisle since she couldn't and that it was just unfair to him. I told her to eat it, because she was the one who was funding her wedding on Dad's money and had then kicked him out. I told her that I had gone to Dad and he had chosen to only walk her down the aisle because of some stupid promise that she couldn't honor. And if she was so hurt that her dear old daddy was miserable, she was more than welcome to switch things back up at her wedding. I told her that I was sure Arthur would understand and that I could even talk to him for her since she was feeling so bad about Dad. She didn't have much to say to that and cut the call. I called Finn up and told him that I didn't want to be part of any more Dad drama before the wedding, and it was his responsibility to ensure that none of it came to me. I was done with this and I had 100 other things to worry or feel excited about, and I couldn't let Dad ruin my day. He had already made me miserable for the majority portion of my life, and I couldn't have him take away from the most special day of my life as well. Finn told me not to worry, not easy, and that he would take care of everything. To say that I was white with nervousness on my wedding day would be an understatement, but thankfully everything was under control. Dad looked quite sullen, but he didn't try to start, so I am thankful for that. And I was too busy enjoying myself after a point to even worry about his pouty face. Sarah tried to stay as far away from Dad as possible, and it was quite awkward between them, but I didn't care. The wedding went without a hitch, and I'm glad. Nobody could dampen the day. When Finn walked me down the aisle, I could feel Dad glaring daggers at my back, but that was all that he could do. I have been told that a couple of people have been asking why Finn was up there and not Dad, and now he has been left to do some damage control. But well, that's his cross to bear. I just want to be done with Sarah's wedding as well, so that there is no scope for any drama and I can live life in peace. Once her wedding is done, I am going to go low contact with Dad for the foreseeable future. I don't see the point of staying in touch with him anyway. Update 3. Sarah got married yesterday. I wouldn't know how it went because she uninvited both Kieran and me from the wedding. I don't know what she wanted to achieve by doing this, but I was more than happy to sit it out. To her dismay, even Finn did not go, so it was only Mom, Arthur, and Dad there. Dad was apparently hopeful that she would change her mind at the last minute and have him walk her down the aisle, but that never happened. It was uncomfortable as hell, and from what photos she has posted, it is evident that Arthur would rather be anywhere but not there. Dad is sullen, Arthur is uncomfortable, and Mom is just done. Other than that, her wedding went well too, not that I care. Mom had called me up to give these details. Dad is miserable, naturally, because he had been holding out hope that at least one of us would succumb and let him do what he wants to. But now all of his kids are practically estranged from him and his personal life is a mess as well. He is not taking it well, but I couldn't care less. I honestly feel it serves him right for being such a shitty father to me and for letting me have a horrible childhood, and not just that, even contributing to it. I am done with him and I don't want either his or Sarah's toxicity to impact this new phase of my life and my new family. I'm glad they are out of my life. Now on to the next story. Story 8. Dad kicked me out when he got remarried because I was living proof of his past mistakes. So I told someone how my parents treated me for years. Now my dad is losing everything. A little over a year ago, my mother eloped with her affair partner. She had been having an affair with somebody from her high school for almost 2 years, and finally they decided to make a run for it. They almost got married, but my mother had a change of heart or something, and she decided to do it the right way. So after being gone for almost 2 weeks, she decided to come back with divorce papers, and my parents got officially divorced. She didn't want custody of me, which was surprising because my parents don't get along with each other. But more than that, they don't get along with me. Anyway, she cut off all ties with everyone and relocated to someplace in Europe with her husband, her partner. And that was good for them, but not so good for me because that left me with no other option but to continue living with my dad. After my mother left, he was even worse than before. He used to hate me earlier, but after my mother left, he started loathing me because I was a constant reminder of the fact that he used to be married to this woman and she humiliated him by running off with some other man. My parents were big on stuff like their reputation and how people perceive them, which was a major part of the reason why. In spite of the fact that they never liked me, they decided to keep custody of me and made sure that I was always presentable and never spoke of the way I was treated at home in public. So even though I had been brought up pretty comfortably, my life has been miserable because of my parents. On top of that, I could never even talk about it to anybody because I was scared of what would happen if they ever found out. However, recently I had to speak up because of how my father kicked me out of the house. I'm 17 right now, but I'm turning 18 in 3 months. So my father thought that it would be the appropriate time to kick me out. He decided to get remarried since almost more than half a year had passed since the divorce was finalized. I knew that he had been dating his secretary. I'm not sure, but I'm guessing that it had started around the time that my mother had filed for a divorce. My father probably thought that there were no obstacles in the way now, but they kept it private until the divorce was finalized. In a few weeks after that, they decided to announce on social media that they were together, and then 3 months ago they got engaged, and just about 2 weeks back they got married. I was there at all of the ceremonies, but it was only an obligation. My dad didn't actually want me there, and it had been made very clear to me that all I had to do was smile for them and talk about how happy I was that my father had decided to move on in life. So I did exactly that, but in spite of it, they decided to label me as a reminder of my father's mistakes in the past and told me that I had to move out and fend for myself now. The two of them decided to have a meeting with me a few days after the wedding and told me that now that they were married, they did not want me living with them anymore because they wanted to start everything all over again. My dad especially did not want me lurking around, and since I was already turning 18 in a couple of months and was supposed to start college, it would be better for me to move out now. I had always known that no matter how much money he had, it wasn't going to make a difference for me because he had always made it very clear to me that after I turned 18, I was on my own. So I always knew that I would have to pay my own way through college, but it doesn't even commence until a couple of months, and I had no idea where I was going to find any sort of accommodation or how I was even going to afford it until college finally started. Besides, even though I had been accepted into a couple of places, I would need money to secure my spot, and the problem was that even if I wanted to take out a student loan, I needed consenting adults to help me out with it. I did not have any savings of my own because even though I had known that I would have to live life on my own after I turned 18, I had been forbidden to work by my parents because they thought that people would question it if they saw me. Since my parents were pretty well off financially, my decision to work would be a questionable one in that case. So out of fear that people would find out about the situation at home, about how they treated me, my parents decided to tell me that I was not allowed to work, which is why I was at a dead end right now. I even tried to bring this up with my dad and my stepmom so they would be at least a little sympathetic towards me. I told them that I couldn't exactly move out because I had nowhere to go and I didn't even have any money of my own, but they chose to be quite nasty about it and told me that it was my problem now. I had until the end of the week, but after that, they would expect me to pack my stuff and be gone. I tried everything from reasoning with them to fighting with them, but nothing seemed to work, so I ended up having a total breakdown in the living room. But even then, they did not seem to care. They just went about their own business and completely ignored me, and I realized that I had no other way left. I had to speak to people and stop being scared of the consequences. Without putting much thought into it, I decided to pack a couple of things up and went to my grandparents' house. My mom's parents passed away when I was very young, so my dad's parents are the only grandparents I have ever known. So far, they had absolutely no idea that I was being treated so badly at home. My parents had drilled it into my head that if I ever spoke up about the fact that they ignored me at home and tried to make it into a bigger deal than it was, they would make sure that I would pay the consequences for it, and they were not joking. I knew that. I had always kept my mouth shut, and my grandparents had no idea until that day when I went to them and I told them everything. I told them that my father expected me to find a place to live and sort out my life on my own in just a week, but that was not going to be possible, and I really needed them to help me out right now. I honestly didn't think that they were going to be helpful since they were actually pretty similar to my dad. They also put a lot of thought into appearances and stuff, and I'm guessing that was something that my dad had inherited. What he hadn't considered was the fact that my grandparents were also not as shallow as him, and if they put up a show of being quite dignified and classy, it was because they were. So when I told them everything, they were outraged and told me that they would take care of me and I didn't need to worry and make myself anxious about the future because I have had enough of that for a lifetime, judging by whatever I had told them. I've been living with them since then, and they have retrieved all my stuff from the house. But that's not where it has ended. My grandpa has actually fired my dad from the company, and now my dad will have to give up everything from the company house to the car. My grandpa runs our family business that his grandfather had started and has been in our family for ages. So naturally, my father had also joined him, and in a couple of years my grandpa was going to retire and my father was going to take over. Now it seems unlikely because my grandfather has decided to let him go quite unceremoniously. My dad is threatening to sue him, but my grandpa isn't scared in the slightest because the lawyers are sharks, and even my dad knows it. Besides, from what I've been hearing, my grandpa actually has cause to fire him, so it can't just be a wrongful termination suit. And if my dad decides to go ahead, it will definitely end up in a loss for him. Apparently, my dad is not very good at the business part from what my grandfather has told me, and that's a big part of the reason why my grandfather is not scared of the lawsuit. Because even firing my father, he had done it on the grounds that he is not competent enough. Of course, that was the official reason. The unofficial reason was that I had told him everything, and now that he knew how I'd been treated, he wanted nothing to do with his son anymore. It didn't even matter that my father was his only child. He literally told me that he would rather not have the business being handed over to my father after what he has found out and is considering letting somebody else take over our family business when he retires. The only reason he had given my father so many chances to learn the ropes of the business and had always retained him in a higher position, even though he was not really capable of the job he was there for, was because my grandfather wanted to keep the business in the family. But now he believed that it would be for the best if he gave somebody else a chance because his son was clearly not worthy of it. My grandparents have also been exceptionally kind to me since I showed up at their house and told me that if I had ever spoken to them about this, they would have made sure that I was taken away from my parents right that instant and placed in their custody and care instead. I wish I would have known that, but I was just really scared of how my parents would react, and they understand that. So we are just trying to undo all the damage that my parents have done so far. It's been pretty great for me because my grandparents have told me that they're going to take care of all my expenses and I don't need to worry about anything. It's pretty relieving because now I don't even have to think about how I'm going to pay for college. I can just have fun and live my life on my own terms instead of constantly being anxious about my father. I thought that now that I've left my father's house, my grandpa and my father could fight it out in court and I wouldn't have to be involved. But I guess my dad is bent on dragging me into this mess and making me feel guilty or something because he hasn't stopped texting me since the last 2 days. I guess he is struggling to cope with the fact that I finally told my grandpa and now he is going to have to face the consequences of everything that he has put me through in the past. Well, not just him, but also my mother. But since she's not directly involved right now, it's going to be he who has to pay. Besides, it was not my mom who decided to kick me out because she got remarried. Again, she left. My father was the one who decided that the house did not have any space for me anymore, even though the house that he lives in was thanks to the kindness of his own father since it's company accommodation, and even though he never deserved it, he got the job and managed to keep it because of my grandfather. But now he has been messaging me from several accounts telling me that what I have done is massively messed up and that he thinks that I'm vindictive and cruel. He thinks that it was really petty of me to go and talk to my grandfather about whatever he had said because he hadn't even done anything wrong. The only reason he had wanted me out of the house was because I was turning 18 in a couple of months and I should have been looking out for myself at this age anyway. He tried to seriously downplay exactly how badly I'd been treated in my childhood by saying that lots of kids don't get the necessary kind of love and affection from their parents and they don't make a big deal out of it like I am. My grandpa had accused him of neglecting me, and he decided to tell me that I wasn't neglected. I was just acting like a brat because my father had refused to support me all his life. That was a blatant lie because I definitely was neglected. Maybe not in the conventional sense of the word since I always had food to eat, clothes to wear and stuff like that, but I literally cannot even remember one instance of my parents sitting with me, trying to talk to me, going on family trips and stuff. I was always just ignored, and even on a few occasions we did take vacations together, the three of us lived in separate rooms, and it was mostly just for photos that we would get together. But after that, it was back to our unhappy family life. So I definitely think I was neglected, and initially I was just ignoring all the messages that my dad was sending me. But then he sent me one message blaming me for everything that was happening to him because apparently not only was he losing the house. My grandmother had decided to buy that very property from the company and transfer it to my name, so I would be getting that house. And not just that, but my father would also be losing his inheritance to me. He told me that it was all my fault, and I feel kind of weird that I'm going to be getting everything that he's losing. What if I decided to go ahead and accept the house and inheritance that my father was supposed to get? Update 1. Hey everyone, so it's been 2 weeks since I left my dad's house, and well, he's in the process of being evicted right now. Also, guys, I didn't know that this was not a widespread practice, but yeah. My grandfather's company is a finance company and it offers accommodation as a part of the compensation package for employees in higher positions like my dad, my grandfather, and a couple of other people. I didn't know it was that common, but anyway, a lot of people had been asking why my dad was going to lose his home and why was he living on company property anyway if it hadn't required him to relocate or anything. The cost of housing in our state is pretty high, which is why my grandfather offers accommodation. But anyway, that's not the point. So my grandmother is already in the process of buying the house and my dad has been served with an eviction notice. So he needs to find someplace to live within 4 weeks and then he has to be gone. At least he gets 4 weeks to find a place for himself. He had given me just 1 week. I think we are being far more lenient to him than he was to me, and thanks to the comments here, I'm no longer blaming myself for whatever he's going through. I think he totally deserves it and I have started to block all the accounts that he had been texting me from. I hadn't been doing it earlier because I thought that if I blocked him, he would just create a new account to text me and get under my skin. But well, he can do that if he wants to. I just want him to know that I don't care. Living with my grandparents has been really nice. They are indeed like my father in some respects. He used to be pretty big on punctuality and stuff and table manners, and so are my grandparents because they like maintaining appearances. But they are so much better than him that I actually feel like I'm living with a genuinely good family right now. Most importantly, they actually seem to care for me and speak to me more than my parents ever bothered to. It's a nice change of pace and I could get used to this, but I'm trying not to because in a couple of months I'm going to have to leave for college. However, until then, this is where I'm going to stay. Now that all of this is out of the way, I would like to address some things and comments that have been made on my original post because it's concerning. A lot of people on the original post called me a doormat and said that I was spineless for never standing up for myself. I would just like to remind people that I'm a couple of months away from turning 18 right now, which is still actually pretty young. For 18 years of my life, I have been conditioned by my parents to believe that if I stand up for myself or if I make a big deal out of the fact that I have always been emotionally neglected, they are going to make me pay the consequences of it. They had made sure that they did everything in their power to intimidate me into keeping quiet, and I was just a kid. I couldn't have done anything, so it's not a matter of being spineless or not. It's just that I was very young and it was their job to protect me and not treat me like that and scare me into keeping my mouth shut. To the people who were questioning how brave I was, it shouldn't have been my duty to be brave in the first place. It should have been their duty to make sure I was protected and felt safe. But I was terrified of them, and you guys don't even know how much it took for me to stand up to them one time and talk to my grandparents about whatever I was going through. It's not like I had never tried. When I was 11 years old, I had a bit of an outburst at a family gathering about something that had happened at home, probably them just not giving me enough attention. And they took me home immediately and grounded me for a month. I was not allowed to interact with them even at mealtimes and pretended like I didn't even exist, which was obviously not easy for an 11-year-old to deal with. I had to spend one whole month alone in my room because this incident had happened over winter break and I couldn't even go to school to meet my friends. It was a horrible time for me, and I learned my lesson after that to never speak up about what happens at home in public. After something like that, I was obviously too scared to speak up, and I don't think it's fair for people to be accusing me of being spineless or being a doormat or whatever. Anyway, even if I took a stand for myself a little too late, at least I did so, and I'm proud of myself for that. Old habits die hard, we all know that, and it's going to take me a lot of time and energy to actively undo all the damage that my parents have done. I guess that's why I was even questioning the fact that it would be the right thing to accept everything that was supposed to go to my dad but now would be given to me. But I know that I deserve this, and I'm not going to shy away from talking about my experience anymore. Update 2. Hi everyone. So it has been a pretty eventful week since I last posted, and my dad has finally started the wrongful termination lawsuit proceedings against my grandpa. But like I said, none of my grandparents are worried. In fact, they don't even seem to care about what's going on. I was a little worried because I did not want them to be facing any sort of losses, be it financially or reputation-wise because of my father's actions. But they reassured me that whatever happens, they are well equipped for it. They have a team of lawyers specifically to deal with stuff like this, and they're going to have this claim squashed within weeks, if not days. So that made me feel slightly better. Ever since I started blocking all the accounts that my dad was making to disturb me, even he had stopped trying to get in touch with me and guilt-tripping because I guess he realized that it was not going to help. I also made my grandparents read all the messages that he had sent me so far, and they made me send them to the team of lawyers as proof. I don't know exactly what it was going to prove, but I did whatever they asked because I want to be of help to them in any way that I can, since I still do feel kind of bad that all of this mess has been created because of me in a way. And because of this lawsuit, my grandmother and my grandfather's company have also had to put the process of selling the house that my dad has been living in on hold because it's a disputed property right now. So I guess if not anything, at least my dad has been successful in pushing back the date of his eviction. But if I have luck on my side, he's not going to be able to push it for much longer. I really do think that I have luck on my side because my grandparents have been encouraging me to speak up about my experience living with my parents. And right now, pretty much all of the family is aware of how my parents have been treating me when I used to be living with them. And all of them have cut my father off. They think that this is the right thing to do because so far my father had always been pushing me to keep my mouth shut so that he would be able to maintain an appearance of being very sophisticated and well brought up. But in reality, that's not the case at all, and this would be the biggest loss for him. The loss of his reputation amongst his family, and I think that's the way to go. He has already been ostracized by his family, and when word of his legal battle with his father because of his termination gets out, he's probably going to be shunned by his friends as well because they seem like the type that would do that. I might be wrong, but I'm really hoping that I'm right. Update 3. Hi, so it's been a couple of days since the proceedings started, and I guess things are not going too well for my father in court because today he showed up at my grandparents' house to speak to them in person without any lawyers. To be honest, I'm not surprised, and neither should he be, because according to my grandfather, he did definitely have a reason to fire my dad officially anyway. I was the one who actually opened the door to him and let him in, but he didn't even acknowledge my existence. He waited for my grandparents to enter the room, and only then he started speaking, and he told them that he was ready to come to a settlement out of court if they would be willing to do that. But my grandpa shut it down instantly. My grandpa told him that right now he was not in a position to be making demands, and he was the one who had started this fight. My grandpa was perfectly happy to just let him go without making a big deal out of it. Nobody would even have to find out why he was getting fired. But now, since he had started the fight, he had to see it through, and my grandpa was not willing to settle. He made that very clear to my father, even though my father kept insisting that none of this was his fault. He had just felt very insulted by the way he had been treated and had made a decision in the heat of the moment, but now that he was losing, he was ready to let it go. After the discussion got a little heated, he decided to turn to me and pointed at me and said that if they needed somebody to blame, it should be me, which was just bizarre because I don't think I have any fault in this. But anyway, I didn't even react. I just walked away from the situation and went back to my room because I didn't think that it was necessary for me to even interact with him. He was not even worth my attention, and that was what I needed to show him. So I went back to my room, and a couple of minutes later, I heard the sound of shouting and then the door slamming shut. Then my grandparents came to my room and told me that I did the right thing by not responding to him because that just would have instigated him even more against me. My dad had apparently called me disrespectful and bratty before leaving. My grandparents, they were going to fail me just the way they had failed him, which is a huge claim to make because the only reason he had a job and a house and a secure future for so long was because of my grandparents. Apparently, he had been irresponsible and a bit of a party animal, and when he was young, which is when he met my mother and gotten married to her. Eventually, he hadn't even started working in my grandfather's company until 8 years ago, since he wanted to strike out on his own, and all his failed business ventures had also been funded by my grandfather. Basically, my grandfather had given him everything that he had asked for, and in spite of that, he was still so ungrateful. After his last failed business, my grandfather decided to give him an ultimatum and hire him in his own company so he could keep an eye on him and train him in the ways of our business so he would be able to run it after my grandfather retired. For 8 years he had waited for my dad to get to the level he had expected him to, and for 8 years my dad had continuously disappointed him, and now whatever was happening had been a long time coming. I had just been a catalyst, and I don't think my dad understands or is ready to accept that he is at fault here. Anyway, he's going to have to duke it out with my grandfather in court now because his attempt to come to a settlement out of court was a bust because of his own behavior, and he can do his worst for all I care. Update 4. Hi, so it has been a couple of months and I'm starting college next week. I didn't even realize how quickly the weeks went by. But anyway, here's an update for everything that has happened in the last couple of months. First things first, my grandfather obviously won that case and my dad walked away with pretty much nothing. I think my dad just gave up and let it all go. It might have also had something to do with the fact that his secretary-turned-wife had filed for divorce, which is not a surprise because everyone knew she was a total digger. But I hadn't expected it to end so fast. Anyway, the bottom line was that my dad gave up trying and let it go. After that, we did not hear from him, and I think that's a good thing. However, my grandpa heard from a couple of other relatives that he had moved into an apartment in the suburbs. My guess is that he'll probably try to start something of his own, and I wish him all the best, I really do. Things have been great with my grandparents and I've really enjoyed living with them, but now it's time for me to move to college soon enough, and I'm pretty excited for that as well. For the first time in my life, I'm going to be living on my own without any restrictions apart from the ones that my college decides. But anyway, it's still going to be better than living with my parents. I'm looking forward to this and I'm keeping my fingers crossed. Now on to the next story. Story 9. Raised my wife's daughter for 22 years, but she wanted her bio dad to walk her down the aisle. Hey Reddit. I'm Andrew, a 52M, self-made man. I grew up in a small town, started working odd jobs as a teenager, and eventually built my own business from the ground up. Now, I'm comfortable, financially secure, and happily married to my wife, Fiona, who's 50. We've been together for 25 years, and it's been a good run. We've got 2 kids, Hannah, who's 24, and Steven, who's 22. Hannah isn't biologically mine, but I've been her dad since she was 2 years old. Fiona was a single mom when we met. Her ex, Shane, was out of the picture, and honestly, I didn't care. I fell in love with both her and Hannah, and when Fiona and I got married, I adopted Hannah without a second thought. Fiona and I have done our best to give Hannah and Stephen a good life. We've worked hard, provided for them, and tried to instill good values. We're not a perfect family, who is? But we've always been close, or so I thought. Now, though, I'm questioning everything. This wedding situation has turned our lives upside down, and I need some advice. So here's the story. Shane is Hannah's biological father, and to be blunt, he's a piece of work. He and Fiona were young when they got together. She got pregnant, and instead of stepping up, Shane bailed. He had a drug problem back then, and from what I understand, he was into some shady stuff, small-time crimes, running with the wrong crowd, that sort of thing. Fiona was left to fend for herself. I came into the picture when Hannah was 2. Fiona was trying to make ends meet, working 2 jobs and doing her best to be a good mom. Shane was nowhere to be found, and honestly, that was a good thing. He didn't show any interest in being a father, and Fiona didn't want him around. I stepped in, fell in love with both of them, and we became a family. I adopted Hannah legally, and Shane was out of the picture until about 10 years ago. Out of the blue, Shane reappeared. He claimed to have cleaned up his act and wanted to be part of Hannah's life. I wasn't thrilled, but Hannah was curious about him. So Fiona and I agreed to let them reconnect. Since then, Shane has managed to worm his way back into her life. He's still financially unstable, always borrowing money from us or Hannah. Despite his shortcomings, he's formed a close bond with her, which, to be honest, has been tough for me to watch. He undermines me at every turn, making snide comments and trying to play the cool dad card whenever he can. I've tried to rise above it, but it's been hard, especially now. A few months ago, Hannah got engaged to her boyfriend, Paul. He's 26, a good guy, and comes from a decent family. Paul's hardworking and wants to make it on his own without relying on his family's money. When they announced their engagement, Fiona and I were thrilled. We offered to pay for the entire wedding as a gift to them. About $100,000 all in, including the venue, the dress, catering, everything. Hannah was over the moon and accepted our offer without hesitation. At first, the wedding planning was going smoothly. Fiona and I were heavily involved, helping with choosing venues, caterers, decorations, and more. We even put down some significant non-refundable deposits. But as the planning went on, things started to change. Hannah became more demanding and difficult to please. There were signs of bridezilla behavior that I tried to brush off as normal wedding stress, but in hindsight, I should have seen what was coming. A couple of weeks ago, Hannah came over for dinner. She seemed nervous, which was unusual for her. I had a feeling something was up, but I didn't press her on it. Fiona and I had made her favorite meal as a surprise, hoping to have a nice family evening. The dinner was tense from the start. Hannah was quiet, picking at her food, and I could tell something was weighing on her. After dessert, she finally spoke up, saying she had something important to discuss. My stomach sank a little. I had no idea what was coming, but I knew it wasn't going to be good. Hannah told us that she had decided she wanted Shane, her biological father, to walk her down the aisle. She said she wanted him to have the father-daughter dance at the reception, too. She claimed it was because Shane was her real father, and she wanted to honor him on her big day. I was stunned. I didn't know what to say at first. I've been the one who's raised her, been there for every milestone, every scraped knee, every heartbreak. I'm the one who's provided for her, given her everything I could. And now she was telling me that I was supposed to take a back seat at her wedding. I couldn't believe it. I tried to keep my emotions in check, but I was hurt, angry, and felt completely betrayed. I reminded Hannah that I've been there for her every step of the way. I've been the one she's called Dad for the last 22 years. I asked her if any of that mattered to her, if she really thought Shane deserved to take those moments away from me. Hannah was adamant. She said she wasn't trying to hurt me, but this was something she needed to do for herself and for Shane. She accused me of trying to make the wedding about me instead of supporting her decision. Fiona, trying to keep the peace, stepped in. She reminded Hannah of everything I've done for her, how I've been the one to step up and be her father in every way that matters. Fiona even brought up some of the sacrifices I've made over the years, things Hannah never knew about, like the times I worked late nights or took on extra work to make sure she had everything she needed. But Hannah wasn't budging. She kept saying that this was her wedding, her choice, and that we needed to respect that. Fiona looked as devastated as I felt, but she didn't want to push Hannah too hard, fearing it would make things worse. The conversation turned into a heated exchange. I couldn't hold back anymore. I told Hannah that I felt like she was throwing away everything we had for some idealized version of Shane. I said it felt like she was trying to rewrite history, erasing me from the picture. Hannah fired back, saying that I was the one who was trying to control everything with my money. She accused me of trying to buy her love and loyalty, which hit me like a punch to the gut. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. All I've ever done is try to give her the best life possible. And now she was accusing me of manipulating her with money. Hannah laid down an ultimatum. Either I step back from the wedding and let Shane have his role, or she would elope with Paul and cut us out completely. She said it was her wedding, her day, and she was going to do it her way no matter what. At that point, I was too angry and hurt to think straight. I didn't know how to respond. Fiona was in tears, begging Hannah to reconsider, but Hannah wouldn't listen. She just kept saying that this was the way it had to be. After thinking things over, I made a decision. I told Hannah that I would respect her wishes and step back from the wedding, but there was one condition. If I'm not fully involved in the wedding, neither is my money. I told her that I wouldn't be funding a wedding where I was treated like a second-class guest. I gave her a few days to think it over and reconsider her decision. I made it clear that I wasn't trying to punish her, but that I couldn't in good conscience pay for something that was going to hurt me so deeply. Hannah was shocked and didn't believe I would actually follow through with it. She thought I was bluffing or trying to manipulate her into changing her mind. But I stood firm. Fiona backed me up, though I could see how much it pained her to do so. The tension in our family was unbearable. Hannah barely spoke to us, and when she did, it was cold and distant. She was obviously upset, but she wouldn't back down. She kept insisting that this was her wedding and that she had every right to make it how she wanted. Shane, predictably, tried to play peacemaker publicly. He acted all concerned and supportive, saying he didn't want to cause any trouble and that he understood where I was coming from. But behind the scenes, I could tell he was pleased as punch that he was finally getting what he wanted. A chance to play the role of the doting father. He started spending more time with Hannah, feeding her lines about how she deserved to have her dream wedding and how I was just being controlling. He was trying to turn her against me, and from what I could see, it was working. With my financial support gone, Hannah and Paul started to feel the strain. They tried to keep the original wedding plans, but it quickly became clear that they couldn't afford it. Vendors started pulling out because payments weren't being made, and the whole thing started falling apart. Hannah tried to pretend everything was fine, but I could see the stress getting to her. She and Paul were arguing more, and the whole wedding planning process was turning into a nightmare. Hannah approached Paul's parents for help, but they politely refused. They said they didn't want to get involved in what they saw as a family matter. Hannah even considered taking out loans, but Paul was against it. He didn't want to start their marriage in debt, especially not for a wedding that was already causing so much trouble. I could see how much Hannah was struggling, and it tore me up inside. Part of me wanted to step in and fix everything, but I knew I couldn't. I had to stand by my decision, as much as it hurt. The weeks leading up to the wedding were tense, to say the least. The family was divided. Stephen, my son, sided with me, which caused even more friction between him and Hannah. They used to be close, but now they were barely speaking. Fiona tried to keep the peace, but even she was starting to lose hope. The whole situation was a mess, and I didn't see any way out of it that wouldn't leave someone hurt. Then, things took an even darker turn. Stephen, who had been suspicious of Shane from the beginning, hired a private investigator to dig into his background. What he found confirmed our worst fears. Shane was still involved in shady activities and had relapsed into drug use. Worse, the PI discovered that Shane had been stealing from the wedding fund, taking money from Hannah that she had given him for the wedding preparations and using it for who knows what. Stephen confronted Shane, who, of course, denied everything and tried to blame me for sabotaging the wedding. Hannah initially believed Shane and accused Stephen of trying to ruin her relationship with her father. But the whole thing blew up. Stephen presented the evidence he had gathered. He showed Hannah the PI's report with photos and everything. Hannah couldn't deny the truth anymore. She was devastated. The man she had been trying so hard to reconnect with, the man she had chosen over me, had betrayed her in the worst way possible. She realized that she had been manipulated and used by Shane and that she had pushed away the people who had always been there for her. Fiona, Stephen, and me. Hannah tried to apologize to me, but I could see how much it hurt her pride to admit she was wrong. She was ashamed and embarrassed, and I could tell she didn't know how to fix the mess she had made. She considered canceling the wedding altogether. She and Paul were at their breaking point, and the dream wedding she had envisioned was in tatters. Hannah was lost, not knowing what to do or how to make things right. I wanted to help Hannah, to step in and make everything okay, like I had always done. But I was deeply hurt, and I didn't know if I could just sweep everything under the rug. Part of me wanted to secretly pay for the wedding, to give her the day she had dreamed of, even if I wasn't fully involved. But I knew that wouldn't solve anything. In the end, I decided to stand firm in my decision. I had to let Hannah deal with the consequences of her choices. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but I knew it was the right thing to do. The wedding day came, but it was nothing like what had been planned. Instead of the dream venue, the ceremony was held in a local community center. It was small and simple, a far cry from the elaborate affair Hannah had wanted. I wasn't involved in the key moments. Shane wasn't there. Hannah had cut him out of her life after everything that had happened. But I wasn't the one walking her down the aisle either. That honor went to Paul's father, who had stepped in at the last minute. I sat in the audience, watching my daughter marry the man she loved, but feeling like a stranger in her life. Hannah was visibly distressed throughout the ceremony. The reception was a small, subdued affair. But just when I thought things couldn't get worse, Shane showed up, drunk and belligerent. He caused a scene, trying to get to Hannah, but was quickly escorted out by security. It was a final ugly reminder of the damage he had caused. In a last attempt to show Hannah that I still cared, I had secretly arranged for her favorite band to play at the reception. When they started playing, Hannah broke down in tears during what should have been the father-daughter dance. It was supposed to be our moment, but it had been ruined by everything that had happened. After the wedding, things didn't get much better. The family relationships were still strained, and Hannah and Paul's marriage started on shaky ground. The dream wedding had turned into a nightmare, and it seemed like no one was happy. Shane disappeared again, leaving Hannah devastated. She had finally seen him for who he really was, but the damage was done. Our family was fractured, and I didn't know if we would ever be able to put the pieces back together. So Reddit, that's my story. I'm sitting here wondering if I did the right thing. Should I have paid for the wedding, even though I wasn't going to be fully involved? Or did I do the right thing by standing my ground and letting Hannah face the consequences of her choices? I feel like I've lost my daughter, and I don't know if I'll ever get her back. I'm just looking for some advice, some perspective from people who aren't as close to the situation. Did I ruin her wedding, or did I just refuse to let myself be disrespected? Update. Hey Reddit, it's Andrew again. It's been about 3 months since Hannah's wedding, and a lot has happened since I last posted. I've been hesitant to share an update because, frankly, I've been processing everything that's gone down. But I'm still struggling with how I handled things and whether I'm making the right decisions now. After the wedding, things between Hannah and me were pretty much non-existent. We didn't talk, and honestly, I wasn't sure if we ever would again. Fiona and I were walking on eggshells around each other, trying to keep things normal for Stephen, but the whole situation was pretty messed up. Stephen was still angry at Hannah, at Shane, at the whole mess, and I was caught in this limbo of missing my daughter but also feeling too hurt to reach out. But life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it, and a few nights ago, something happened that I never saw coming. It was late, maybe around midnight, when my phone rang. I wasn't asleep, hadn't been sleeping well for a while, honestly, so I picked up immediately. It was Hannah. I could barely recognize her voice. She was crying so hard. She asked if she could come over, saying she needed to talk to me. So I told her to come over. Hannah arrived about half an hour later. When she walked through the door, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked exhausted. Her eyes were red and puffy, her hair was a mess. She didn't say much at first. We sat down in the living room, and there was this heavy silence between us. I could feel her struggling to find the right words, and I didn't want to push her, so I waited. After what felt like a while, Hannah finally spoke. She apologized. Really apologized. For everything. She admitted that she had been wrong, that she had let Shane get into her head and manipulate her into believing that he deserved a place in her life that he hadn't earned. She said she had been so caught up in this idea of a real father that she had lost sight of what really mattered. She told me that she was sorry for the way she treated me, for pushing me away, and for accusing me of trying to control her with money. She said she knew now that I was only trying to protect her and give her the best life possible. And then she broke down, crying and asking me if I could ever forgive her. Hearing those words from Hannah hit me hard. I had been waiting to hear them, but now that she was in front of me apologizing, I told Hannah that I needed time to process everything, that I wasn't sure if I could just forgive and forget. I said that while I understood she was in a difficult place, the things she said and did still hurt deeply. She nodded, saying she didn't expect me to forgive her right away, but that she would do whatever it took to make things right. Then Hannah started talking about her marriage to Paul. Things weren't going well. The wedding had been a disaster, and the aftermath had been even worse. They were struggling financially because of the scaled-down wedding and the debts they had taken on to make it happen without my help. Paul was resentful, not just of Hannah, but of the whole situation. Of me, of Shane, of the drama that had overshadowed what was supposed to be the happiest time of their lives. Hannah confessed that she felt trapped. She didn't know how to fix her marriage or where to turn for help. The stress was eating her alive, and she was terrified that her marriage was falling apart before it even had a chance to begin. To make matters worse, Shane hadn't completely disappeared. He was still around, making promises to Hannah that he would help her financially, that he would be there for her. But deep down, Hannah knew that these were likely empty promises. Shane had a history of making grand gestures that never materialized, and Hannah was starting to see through them. But she was confused and vulnerable, and part of her still wanted to believe that Shane could change. She admitted that she didn't know who to trust anymore, and that she was scared of making the wrong decisions. She asked me for advice, for help, and for guidance, the very things she had rejected from me before. In the meantime, the rest of the family hadn't been idle. Extended family members had been gossiping about the whole situation. Everyone had an opinion, and none of it was helpful. Fiona's sister had called me out of the blue, offering advice on how to handle Hannah. I tried to tune out the noise, but it wasn't easy. Everyone seemed to think they knew what was best, but none of them were living this nightmare. Hannah asked me for help in a way I never thought I'd hear. She wanted me to help her fix the mess she was in. She said she knew she had to make things right, not just with me, but with Paul too. She wanted to fix her marriage, to find a way to move forward, but she didn't know how to do it on her own. She promised that if I helped her, she would do everything she could to rebuild our relationship. She said she was willing to go to therapy, to have the hard conversations, to face whatever consequences came from her actions. All she wanted was a chance to make things right. I didn't give Hannah an answer right away. I told her I needed to think about it, to talk it over with Fiona and Stephen. She understood and left. That night, I sat down with Fiona and Stephen and told them everything. Fiona was relieved that Hannah had reached out. She didn't want me to get hurt again, and she was worried that if we helped Hannah too much, it might enable her to fall back into old patterns. Stephen, on the other hand, was more protective. He was still angry with Hannah and wasn't sure if she deserved another chance after everything she had put us through. We talked for hours, going back and forth. In the end, it came down to one simple question. Was I willing to risk getting hurt again to help my daughter? Before making any decisions, I decided to take a more proactive approach with Shane. I couldn't stand the thought of him continuing to mess with Hannah's life, especially now that she was starting to see him for who he really was. So I talked to a lawyer about the money Shane had stolen from Hannah's wedding fund. We had evidence, thanks to the PI Stephen hired, and we decided to pursue legal action against him. It wasn't about the money. It was about sending a message to Shane that he couldn't keep manipulating and hurting Hannah. It was also a way to protect her from falling into his trap again. The lawyer said we had a strong case, and while it wouldn't be easy, it was worth pursuing. I made sure to let Hannah know what I was doing and why. She was shocked at first, but she understood and even thanked me for it. After a lot of thinking, I finally made my decision. I told Hannah that I was willing to help her, but there were conditions. First, she had to go to therapy, not just individual therapy, but couples therapy with Paul, too. They needed to work on their marriage and figure out if they could truly make it work. Second, I told her that if she wanted my help, she had to cut ties with Shane completely. No more believing in his empty promises or letting him worm his way back into her life. I said that if she couldn't do that, I wouldn't be able to help her because it would only lead to more heartache for everyone involved. Finally, I told her that this was her last chance. I was willing to forgive her and move forward, but if she betrayed my trust again, I didn't know if I could ever recover from it. She needed to understand that while I loved her, I couldn't keep putting myself in a position to be hurt. Hannah agreed to all of my conditions without hesitation. She said she was ready to make the necessary changes and that she wanted to prove to me and to herself that she could be the daughter I deserved. The next step was to bring the whole family together. We had a meeting with Hannah, Paul, Fiona, Stephen, and me. It was the first time we'd all been in the same room since the wedding. We started by discussing what had happened, with everyone sharing their perspective. It was hard. There were a lot of tears, a lot of apologies, and a lot of emotions. Paul admitted that he had been struggling with resentment, not just towards Hannah but towards her whole family. He felt like he had been dragged into a situation that he couldn't control, and it had made him question his marriage. Stephen, surprisingly, was the one who broke the ice. He told Hannah that while he was still angry, he missed his sister and wanted to find a way to move forward. That seemed to open the door for the rest of us to start talking more openly. By the end of the meeting, we had a plan in place. Hannah and Paul would start therapy immediately, and we would all work on rebuilding our relationships. It wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like there was hope. A few weeks later, we had our first family dinner since the wedding. It was awkward at first, but as the evening went on, it felt like we were starting to find our rhythm again. Hannah was still dealing with the fallout from her marriage, and Paul was struggling to let go of his resentment. But there were signs that they were starting to work through it. I was helping, and while they still had a long way to go, they were committed to trying. There are still some issues, though. Paul's resentment hasn't completely disappeared, and I can tell he's still angry with me. I get it. I wasn't exactly in his corner during the wedding fiasco, and I know that's left a mark. Stephen, on the other hand, is more protective than ever. He's keeping a close eye on Hannah, making sure she's not slipping back into old habits. I appreciate it, but I worry that he might be holding on to his anger too tightly. So that's where we are now. Reddit. I've decided to help Hannah, but with conditions that I hope will protect both her and the rest of the family. This will probably be my final update, as I'm ready to focus on my family. Thank you for reading and for all the support and advice you've given to me so far. It's meant more to me than you know. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.